Hello. Oh, thanks for being here. Thanks, Finger, for stopping by. Well, I feel like I haven't seen you in a little bit. That could just be me, but hope you're having a good day and a happy New Year's. Thanks for stopping by, being part of the community. All right, we are going to do our usual thing. We're going to have the Reverie, as we always do, as we always manage. Yeah. So. Whew.
There 4 years?
It's a 3-year.
Okay, cool.
Hey,
What's up?
what's up? I need you to talk.
Testing 1 2 3 1 2 3 testing.
Not you. Oh, not that way. Oh my God.
He means
killing.
killing time, I think.
Oh, I see.
I think in the whatever the
see.
entertainment world, isn't that called like vamping or whatever? I can't
Small
remember.
talk is what prime guys want.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So Corey, what's your deal?
What's my-
How are you doing all that?
I've got many deals. Is this a therapy session?
Yeah,
I'll
it
take
is.
it. If it's free therapy,
Yeah.
I'll take it. But I got many deals. Where to begin?
You think you got a lot of deals? Do you want to
We're
go
talking
band for
about-
band?
Yeah.
I've got
yeah.
way more deals than you.
Uh,
Name your top 3 deals. Go.
top 3 deals. Probably
Yeah, nothing. Nothing. is what I thought.
overly optimistic. Probably blindly optimistic.
That's not a deal. It's a character trait.
Oh, you mean literal deals? Then I have
Yeah.
no deals then.
Oh my God! Literally dealless. Get hold of this Corey individual. No deals. That's you, Corey. That's how you look right now. You look
Yeah,
ridiculous right now.
I am a ridiculous person. Pretty milk toast. No deals. Lame, boring. I'm pretty sure that's why Prime invites me on these panels, just for the sheer boredom aspect.
That's why I like to pervade my audience, right? Like, yeah.
Did anybody do anything exciting for New Year's Eve, rather?
No. Hopefully next year.
Well, I mean, I asked just out of like, if you desire for nothing, because I mean, I didn't do anything exciting.
I desire.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I've told this story before, but like I used to travel for New Year's and be in a different
Okay.
country. Yeah. I used to just like travel the world and celebrate in different places, which was amazing. It was a lot of fun. But I don't have any cash, it's up to channel. But yeah, it's some amazing experiences. But yeah, I haven't been doing it for a long time because, lack of funds.
And well, because you sort of hinted at, let's say, your extensive travels. Like, I know you've at least been to Japan, because you talk about, or rather, like when Japan is brought up, you share that you have like personal experience there. Like,
Yeah,
has that,
I got a name drop. You're like, oh, I mean, have you been to this shop? No, not really. Okay, well, I don't think you know what talking about. Yeah, sorry, Corey.
that's like, is that was that one of your New Year's destinations? Or that's
Yes.
like totally separate.
Yes.
Okay.
I traveled. I started traveling outside of New Year's as well. Later on, again, had cash to do so. But yeah, that was one of my early ones to Japan. I used to travel with a friend of mine from high school. He was part of like a friend group I had, and it was surprising. Like when the other people in the friend group found out that we were traveling, they were all surprised because him and I, like we were friends, but like didn't get along super well. Yeah, we like annoyed each other a lot, but
You tolerated each other.
at some points, yeah. But he was the only one who had the funds and the desire to travel. And so we started traveling together at first. And we had some good times. But we had like completely different styles of how we want to do things and how we just interact with other people. He wasn't a bad person or anything like that. It's just it was
just different.
difficult. Yeah. And anyway, we ended up that friendship fell apart over the travels, which was unfortunate, but it is what it is. but during that one, I kind of like let him like uh, design the trip. Put together that itinerary, which I'll never do again. But he had us. So we went to Tokyo, Kyoto, and Osaka. And
Wow.
he later on went to Nara as well. But he put us on in Kyoto during the New Year celebration. Which again,
Mm.
this is what my I shouldn't have let him design it for me. But we were at a temple when it happened, which is an experience certainly. But like it's like a very muted experience, right? Like you had like celebrations, like it was like a lot of people at the temple, and like these like celebrations happening. You had these monks ringing a bell, but not in time with the New Year's. And I
Yeah.
remember just like walking through that temple and people looking at their watches like, oh yeah, it's New Year's. Oh yeah, it's cool. And whatever. That was it. That was the celebration.
High five.
Yeah. I had met these another group of travelers at the time, and they had gone to they had stayed in Tokyo for the celebration. I was like, oh yeah, it was awesome. It was amazing, and I missed that. So I'm willing to go back to Japan for many reasons, but I want to do the celebrations. I have another friend, a completely different friend, who wants to excuse me, go because he missed out last time. He's a high school friend that I'm still in contact with, but he couldn't go because he didn't
Wow.
have the funds. So I'd like to go back and experience what it's like in Tokyo. Yeah. So I said a
Uh,
lot.
It
and
sounds
I'm
expensive.
yeah,
It is.
but probably worth it. I've never been. I've never like I think the furthest I've traveled is like whatever Western Canada probably. But I'm curious. Since it seems like you're very well traveled. And I think the way people travel is super interesting to me because like
Mm.
there seems to be sort of like for some people they like as you sort of alluded to like they have like an itinerary like here this is everything planned we gotta stick to the plan, and then I know other people that it's like they can't do it that way or there's always that source of conflict of like no we gotta stick to the plan when they're traveling with someone that like yeah doesn't want to do that well like they want to sort of like wing it and just like sightsee but like yeah the type of person oh are you that type of person like I got an agenda we got to go here visit here for 1 hour and then move on to the next place.
Okay. Corey and Lyra, since you two both know me very well, right? What would you expect? What kind of person would you expect me to be? Of the choices
Pro-
given.
Probably the more laid back and not stick to the plan, the
Lactoid?
more improvised probably.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I think so. I think that's probably an accurate summation. Um, you strike me as a little bit introverted. Am I right about that, or you think am I wrong?
I think I'm sorry. I've got the hiccups right now, so please excuse me. Um, I I think I'm the perfect balance between the two, right? So like I've told you guys before, I'm a fucking recluse. Right now.
The
And
sex robots give it away
the
when
sex
we talk about
All right, fair. That but yeah, but I'm like police of it from the world. But like I can like switch on a dime, right? Like when I like to be more outgoing that I am, and I am like by a lot. And it's not like because so for introverts, from what I understand from them, is that like social interactions tire them, and it's just like it drains the battery. But for me, I, I guess for an extroverts are told like it powers them. It doesn't necessarily do either for me, but I'm just fine being completely alone for very, very, very long periods of time, or being surrounded by people for very long periods of time. I'm okay with both.
So I think there's maybe a sort of a I think a technical I don't know if it's an official term, but I think the sort of like that mix there's like I think maybe referred to as like an ambivert maybe.
Yeah.
But so here's my maybe I'm obviously not a psychologist, but my hot take is like introversion doesn't really exist because like I think I'm probably more on the introverted side, but the concept of like yeah being like drained or like after like some sort of social event or social gathering, you have to like go and recharge that like does not resonate with me.
Mm.
Of like I don't particularly like like large gatherings or crowds. If anything, like I tend to shy away from crowds just because I don't trust large crowds of people, and I don't want to be trampled or whatnot, or like that mob mentality. I just never want to deal with. But like I've never like drained, or at least so far, I've never been drained by a social interaction. And like I can totally, I think, be sociable, but more on a one-on-one basis. But when it's a crowd of people, like I just don't really care.
I
But I've
was
never
just
drained.
having a conversation about like mobs trampling people, but and it's related to my travels actually. But well,
That
so
happens in Japan, or at least I know there was recently like an event in Japan where
that
people.
was in Korea, at least as far as I know.
Oh,
I don't
sorry.
think-
Yeah, no, I could be.
No, you're being super racist. It's cool.
Yeah.
No.
Par for the course for me as usual.
um, but but maybe this was a separate incident that happened in Japan that I'm unaware of. But I know in Korea, a lot of people died. Like I think in the hundreds, young people died in a recent trampling. Anyway, but back to the what I was doing. Um, so I am definitely the type to just like uh, wing it, right? Like, I remember when I went to Colombia, I landed, I got to my hotel or sorry, hostel, and it was like at midnight, right? And I sat down on my bed. I'm like, okay, now what? 'Cause I came there and literally
I just
nothing.
planned the flight and hotel, nothing
That's
else.
pretty much it. That's what I did. And actually ended up being one of my best trips. I ended up being one of my very
Doesn't
best trips.
surprise me.
Because of the people that I met. And that's what makes so and I actually ended up extending my trip because I had met some awesome people and I stayed there longer. So it was really, really, and I had never done that before. So that was a really amazing trip. However, I do feel after doing both, right? One being imposed on me, the planning being imposed on me, and then doing literally fucking nothing. I've realized there needs to be a mix.
There's a middle ground somewhere in there.
There is, yeah. Like for instance, when I went to Barcelona, there's that famous church which I can't pronounce. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? Like it's
I
like
believe so.
it's super tall, like and it's like spikes. Like it's a church made of spikes. It's really awesome. But it's like a world-renowned site, and that was like super interesting. As soon as I saw it, I don't think I had even heard of it previously, right? But as soon as I saw it, I'm like, I want to go there. I really want to go inside that place. It looks amazing. But you had to have like tickets like weeks in advance because it's so popular. And then in Korea, I wanted to go to the DMZ, right? So and I did, but like to go up to the line, right? You know, where I could make my escape to freedom, like that, like that army veteran did. If to do that, you had to get like special tickets, and I think they had to do like a little bit of background check on you or something. I forget what it was, but there was like a procedure to it that I couldn't do last minute, and so instead there's like these tunnels underneath that you can go and check out. Apparently, like I think it was the North Koreans who dug those tunnels, like trying to like invade South Korea. And it's like it's really cool. It's a really cool like experience, but it's not like the actual DMZ line, which I can do. So and so basically, what I'm saying is that in the future, I'm going to look some things up, and I'm going to try to get some tickets in advance for things I really really want to see. But like that's as much as it is. Like I don't plan things out day by
I have
day.
a couple of things planned, and then there's some whatever free range time
Yeah.
for Prime.
Yeah.
I think if I were to do any extensive traveling, which is probably unlikely, that would probably be my approach as well. But like I know people who are like extensive travelers, and like each time they travel, it seems like every minute is planned to like everything is planned to the minute, and it seems like a nightmare. Or at least for me, that would be like a nightmare
Yeah.
and not fun to travel with.
Yeah. Hey, Kamikaze, thanks for being here. And Snide Armada. Puppet mills create jobs, make puppies affordable, and bring happiness to children. Okay. And he says flashlight in the back. Someone's got a flashlight in the back. Like in there. I don't know about that. So we're waiting on one other person.
I think they were talking about the dog.
Yeah, we're talking about
I-
fucking the dog. Yeah.
Yeah.
Where's
yeah.
Doobie when we need him?
Where
in
is
the new year?
Doobie? Unfortunately, we won't have him here for this. This is a perfect conversation for him, but he wasn't able to make it. We're waiting on one other person. I'm going to give him a little bit more time, and then we'll just get started. Yeah. Anyone have any more questions for me about traveling, or do you have maybe a story
Well,
of your own
so
traveling?
far, based off of your stories, like the destinations that I've gathered is like Korea, Japan, Spain, and like where else, if you recall.
So Colombia.
Right, yeah, and that was also yeah.
I went to the Netherlands, which is a good trip. I mean, it was a. I mean, overall, it was a good trip. That's where I broke up with my friend. Like him and I, that was the end of it. For us, pretty much. Um,
I'm
uh,
curious if you want, like, was that like mid trip or like after the trip's like, see you
mm,
later, never want to see you again.
it was. I mean, like that's where things exploded mid trip. But at the end, I just decided I'm not going to even continue with the friendship. I was so I was so pissed. I'm so pissed. Like literally the one time in my life I actually experienced seeing red. That's the thing that happened. I didn't know that was a thing that you could do. Like I thought that was just metaphorical, but no, I actually saw
Got some
red.
bloodlust.
Like it was so unbelievable. But like other things building on each other. Like it was like boiling point and yeah. But though again, I do wish my friend well. I hope he's doing well wherever he is. Okay. And what else? What else? So and I always forget like a spot. Oh, I went to Toronto one time. We were broke. And so that's where we went. It was Toronto.
I can say that I've been to Toronto. Not nothing really exciting there. Pretty
I
lame
had
city.
an amazing trip in Toronto. Like it was definitely one of my best
Really?
in Toronto. It was fantastic. I barely explored the city. Instead, I was staying inside my hostel most of the time. It was a great hostel, great people. We had a lot of fun. We played board games. We were having such a good time. Like
Wow.
yeah, I barely had a chance to do anything there, but like it was really really good time. I loved
Oh yeah, well, just so you know, there are board games in other cities, and I don't know if that's unique to Toronto.
How
it.
how expensive is traveling in terms of like the trip to Japan? Like how much overall you think something like that would cost
Good
these
question.
days?
Yeah, and like this was a while ago, so inflation adds to that. But obviously, is the plane ticket is number I shouldn't say that. The plane ticket for me was always number one, because I didn't mind cheaper accommodations. But that changes for different people. So like 2 grand could be set back for a plane ticket both ways back then for me. But again, that might have changed. I so when I so the first trip I went to was actually well technically it was New York, but like beyond that it was England, right? Um and we were stayed in London and we stayed in a hotel, right? And it was it was supposed to be like the pictures made it look a lot more expansive, those rooms. It was not. It was not. But then after that, Japan being my second trip, it was more we stayed at hostels. That was the first time we stayed at a hostel, and it was tough for me as a city dweller to like leave my stuff around and just like be in a communal area like that. You know, it was very
Right.
different for me. But once I got used to that, like that was amazing because I say that I travel alone, but I'm never alone. So I like I meet people like immediately there, make friends, and go out and do stuff because there's a lot of people who are our age doing the exact same thing, right? And all of them are most of them are traveling either alone or in small groups. What will happen is for well designed hostel, like the point is for you to meet people while like for hotels you're supposed to be private. You go to your room and be by yourself. So in a hostel, a good hostel will have like a common room and you'll just walk in, you'll see like a bunch of people talking, and your first thought is like, oh, all these people know each other, and they're already got their plans, they're gonna do their thing. Maybe I shouldn't uh uh like try to insert
Intrude.
myself, yeah.
Yeah.
But when you actually talk to them, you're like, oh, how do you know each other? It's like, oh, we just met here, right? And we're forming a group. Would you like to do this thing? right? Or you put something forth. Oh, I'm gonna go to this tourist site. Like, oh, I haven't been there. Can I come with you? And that happened to me all the time. Really fun. When I went to Hong Kong, like when I got to my hostel, like within 10 minutes, I had a group to go to dinner. Within 10 minutes.
The two biggest things that prevent me from traveling are cost is a big one, but then also like toilets, the whole toilet situation. I don't like the idea of like using public toilets, and when you're out like in somewhere where you don't really know anything, you sometimes you have no choice. It seems too complex for me.
I don't know about too complex, but I understand the concern.
I don't. Hold on. No.
A lot of people empathize with this one, Prime. A lot of people don't like the idea of being away from their own bathroom for too long.
um. I mean, look. I hear you. I hear you on that. Right. I do. Um. So, but what do you count as a public toilet? Would you count? Obviously, like if you're like out and about, like at a restaurant or something, fine. But like at the hotel or the hostel, would you count that as a public toilet?
It's like it's in this weird intermediary where it's not as bad as like a ramped toilet at like a festival or something like that's like nightmare scenario. Like I always like purge if I'm ever going to be like at some event where that might happen, like
He's
well in
fasting a
advance.
week prior up until the
Yeah,
festival.
fuck that shit. But then I guess it's like a little bit more privacy, but still not. It's still not like your own like abode, right? It's not
Yeah.
your. There's a reason they call it a throne, Prime. It's
Yeah,
it's
I
it's
hear you.
it's within your castle, and the idea that you don't have access. I don't know. I just don't like it. I don't like the idea. So I'm going to pay a whole bunch of money to go somewhere to be uncomfortable. It's
I feel like Electro, I believe in you. I truly do, right? And I feel like you can acclimate, like especially if you're planning around like using the toilet in your hotel room, right? In your accommodations. At the very least, if you can manage that, then
yeah, but like 2 grand is like 3 high quality firearms. And so like whenever I'm like taking a look at anything that costs money, like I'm always just measuring like how many firearms is this? That's 3. And I don't know. It just seems again,
it's it's
there's
two
more
grand
material ways.
to be clear, it's like 2 grand plus. I usually spend like 4 grand on
It's
everything.
6.
Yeah. Yeah, and you could go longer. I have a friend, and she loves like high class accommodations. She pays for that shit. Whenever we are together, she pays for that shit because I'm not. I'm fine with like a hostel or type thing. But sorry, anything. That's like that's an interesting way of measuring things through firearms. Super interesting way of
Very
measuring, but it's
American
something
way.
you value.
My opportunity cost is X number of firearms.
Yeah. But
I'm
like
serious.
but I believe you. But like, what do the firearms give you? Is it an experience? Like, you already have firearms, like to protect yourself. I'm sure you have enough to protect yourself, right? So, what do additional firearms give you?
Um,
More masculinity, more
there
compensation.
is, yeah. There's like besides the general sense of well-being that I think is important to measure. I think there's different firearms for every different situation. So there's you need one for hunting, you need one for when you're walking around, you need one for defending your house. Like there's
Mhm.
every situation requires one. You need a different one for turkey, you need a different one for deer. You may need a different higher caliber one if you're going to go hunting moose or bear, for example. I know Gibbs talks a lot about the snakes that are dangerous in his area, right? You may need a particular one for that. Um, so when you add it all up, I mean, there's, you get to like 30, you might have all your bases covered, but I mean, there's still always going to be some bases uncovered. And so um, it sounds like by traveling, you're leaving yourself at least partially unprepared, Prime. Would you agree?
I mean, indeed, I'm not. I don't come strapped for ambushes. That's true. Uh,
And then you also need a firearm for traveling this. You got to save up even more.
No, do not do that. The TSA will not. I legally recommend against this. Yeah.
yeah. Um. Okay. So I feel like you would probably do well with a friend, like a better like for traveling with a friend. What do you think about that? If you were to.
I would. Is it like a really underhanded? Like, I think you do better, Lactoid,
No,
if you have a
I'm not
friend,
doing.
right? You're
No,
talking
I'm
about
just.
stockpiling all these guns. Please get friends, Lactoid. Please.
No, no. I promise you now.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Yeah. I mean, I think it'd be fun. I think it'd be okay. I have traveled with friends before. I traveled with one friend who got so blasted that I had to like basically babysit him through the airport security process, which was horribly awkward because he was very aggressive and very rude. And I was like, they're just like, the cops are like standing right there, the TSA agents, and he's like, just saying really mean stuff, threatening me, and I'm saying like, it's a joke, guys, it's a joke. Of course, airports are not the place for jokes.
No, they're not.
Yeah, so that's a bad experience. So I usually travel alone or with family, I guess.
Okay. Well, if you're ever interested, I don't drink, as you know. Be the responsible one.
You don't drink
But
at all, Prime.
yeah, you know this about me.
I knew that about you because I've
Yeah,
also
I've
said
said
the
this.
same thing. I've never been drunk in my life.
Yeah, me either. I've never been drunk either. Yeah.
Good for you. Wow.
Yeah, we've definitely talked about this, even in private. We've talked. But it's fine. It's fine if you don't remember. Yeah.
I was probably drunk. Sorry.
Yeah.
And if I can say, as whatever, a plug for my own city. If you're looking for travel on a budget, screw Toronto. Montreal is a much better place, and I can almost guarantee you'll have a much better time in Montreal than Toronto.
I've been to Montreal probably like twice before, and we'll get started soon.
Really?
Sorry to my audience. Looks like the other person isn't going to be here, so we'll get started soon. And I don't want to get Sith bored, right? This is not intellectually stimulating. But yeah, I've been to Montreal because I had family there. My parents drove up the East Coast into
Right? Yeah, that
Montreal.
makes total sense.
Yeah, and family that I actually dislike. Long story. But in any case, the one thing about Montreal I remember is that there is this church that's on this like massive hill,
Yep,
right? Yeah. Okay.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
I remember as a child
Lots of steps.
climbing those fucking steps. Burned to my memory. Burned to my memory. Like it was bullshit. But it actually reminds me of when I went to, I think it was South Korea. There was another temple like that on a hill, Buddhist one, if you could believe, right? Yeah. But it was, oh my god, it was so freaking long getting up this hill. Like they had like little rest areas, right? Like as you went up, and I remember like taking a break, and there was like this old man, this old I guess Korean individual, was there, right? And we were like looking at each other, like, yeah, you get it. This is this is a lot, right? But we kind of like gave each other strength, and we're like, okay, let's keep going. It was like I don't know, just a fun encounter. And me and old man managed to climb the hill. All right, that's it. But uh, like guys, I would definitely recommend traveling. Like we can end kind of on this note. Is that I would definitely recommend traveling. It changes your perspective on on lots of things, right? It shows you like things that other countries are doing better. You get a chance to experience new food and a new way of living. Now it's not that different, at least for me. I go to like the city, so it's not like, that different, But like uh, like the contrast is like remarkable, and it's an experience that lasts. So I hear you, Lactoid, when you're saying that you could get like another thing, another
Or
gun that could.
Rolexes.
Are you a watch guy?
I have a Tissot. That's the most expensive watch I have, but I don't have any Rolexes. But
And you get
I
like
mean,
I literally don't
I
know.
mean,
This is just my ignorance. Can you even get a Rolex for less than 2,000? Or
well,
I don't know the prices.
so Prime said 4 grand. You could
Oh,
probably get one. I mean, a super low end one. Potentially, I don't know. I mean, they usually go for like 10 to 15 for like the lower, kind of the lower models, and then they go. I mean, they can go. The sky's the limit, right? But I mean, if you want like a mid-range, 30, 35.
Yeah, that's
Mm,
So that's like what?
Christ.
How many? It's like 4 trips.
I'd much rather have a gun in that case. I think I can go a
Yeah.
lot of than a
I would choose an actual. I can see more utility out of a gun than a Rolex or any sort of. I think watches are dumb, or whatever decorative watches are dumb.
They glitter though. They fucking glitter.
They
I have
glitter.
a friend who has a Rolex.
I
And
know they
like,
glitter. Yeah.
yeah, when he walks
just-
in the club, right, it's just clear. It's obvious. Like you look at his wrist and it looks like a chandelier. The way the light hits it, I don't. I mean, they have some brilliant people over there in Switzerland that are working on these fucking watches. I'm not paid by Rolex, by the way. But just to be like, they're very impressive watches. Are they overpriced? Of course. Like all luxury items, they're going to be overpriced. Um, but I mean, part of it is to show off, right? Part of it is to say, look how cool I am. I've got a cool watch, and to potentially make up for some like deficiencies in personality, which
Yeah. As
is
we're going to
my
talk about,
primary. Yeah, it's my primary interest in them personally. So
I think in one of our topics, I think self-esteem and confidence issue will be brought up probably at some point. And some people try to compensate for things.
real quick, Corey, have you ever heard of Doctor? Can I even say his name? Dr. Edward Group. You ever heard of that guy before?
That's something is ringing a bell in my brain, but nothing is like coming.
You would hate him. You would hate him so much. I'll bring him up later during the second topic, but you would hate him so much. He's the guy who designs Alex Jones's supplements.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
He doesn't sound like a good person. Was
Yeah,
it?
you should go look at his Telegram. It's
Now I
pretty
know what
crazy.
Prime was talking about with seeing red. I see it all red.
Like what's it called, like Brain Max or something, whatever his brain supplement is. I remember.
Well, no. So Alex Jones what he does is he just simply rebrands it, right? So he takes this other guy's supplements, rebrands it to make it more masculine, like Survival Shield, like High Caliber, Paleo something, shit like that. But then the guy who makes it, like, he names it much more naturey shit because it's all about all natural,
Okay.
homeopathic, naturalopathic medicine. And he sells a $1,500 course on urinotherapy, I think is what it's called. And I want to know, Corey, if you've heard of this, where you.
Oh no, well, let's hold on to it for.
I think I know what you're
Okay.
referring to, but yeah,
Okay,
we'll
yeah.
Oh my god.
put a cork in it in that
Wait,
type
have
of
you
therapy.
taken the course? Have you taken the course?
No,
then, Corey?
I'm not.
Uh,
No. $1,500? That's like
less than a Japanese trip, right?
that's like thousands and gallons of maple syrup. That is my currency up here.
Okay, we'll get started. Hopefully our last guest will be here soon. But we might just be this small group, but we got a powerful group. Hello all. This is Reverie Roundtable, which we do Mondays 8 p.m. Eastern. Happy New Year's to all of you. First day of the year. And yeah, if you like our conversation that we just had, consider supporting the channel, subs to the channel, give bits of gifting subs. Being the first one of the year, the only one. One first for an entire year. And I'd love it for you, honestly. So subs to the channel, give bits of gift subs, or resubs also help. And usually Amazon Prime says Prime Gaming. Okay, so I'm gonna introduce our friends here, and then we'll get started. Start with our friend Corey. Corey, how are you?
I'm doing well. I can't think of a better way to start my year than being invited on a Prime panel and actually being here. And I apologize for actually not being able to make it last week because I totally wanted to make it. But had some family obligations. But also, to be fair, compared to some of the relationships I have with some of my family members, like I've spent more time here with you guys. And also compared to some family members, I very much enjoy my time here more. Absolutely. I consider not all of my family members, for sure. Like definitely overall, I love my family deeply. But I also love being here and I never take it for granted. But yeah, looking forward to getting into it with these fine people. You can find me on Twitch, Corey Campbell 84, Twitter, X, Instagram, YouTube. It's Corey Campbell. Yeah, thank you so much for inviting me.
The thing that you miss is a special conversation that me, Aiko, and Lactoid had at the very end. That was
Oh no, I tuned in. There was the topic about chocolate production or cacao, as the technical term, and then yeah, towards the end, I also saw a little bit of the end as well, and that was a great conversation going through some libertarian theory
no,
and all that
no,
stuff.
no, no. It was even later than that. It was the after panel. Interesting thing.
Deep libertarian theory. No.
Something like that. Something like that. Oh, but yeah, we got to get to know our friend Lactoid a bit better, and it was stupendous. But we'll leave it at that for now. Let's go to our friend Synth, who we haven't had here in a long time because they're a hard-working individual. Like with school, like I'm sure getting better grades than I did in university. Thank you, Seth, for taking a bit of time out of your whole schedule of your family and your schooling to be here with us.
No, I appreciate it. It's super fun coming on here. We've got some really interesting topics lined up today. I've been sick for a little bit, so if my voice sounds kind of like hoarse or fucky, I apologize, but you guys will have to bear with it.
Huh? Or you sound silky smooth. Thank you so much, friend. And last but not least, oh no, I do apologize. Ugh, my God. I can see the rage in his eyes, so I'm gonna correct my mistake. Okay, all right. Oh, Lactoid. I dropped the ball there, friend. Lactoid. Thanks for being here. How are you? It's been a full week. It's been a year since I seen you, friend. How are you?
Doing all right. I'm optimistic. I'm tentatively optimistic for 2024. Hopefully, it brings us more fruits and treasures than the prior year. But I'm happy to be on here. Like Toy TV, Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube.
Roots and treasures from the prior year. Like, did you get off that from like a Hallmark card? Like, what, what was that? What was that?
I
But
no,
okay.
I didn't. I was just thinking about like the Russian war, and I was like, well, that's kind of sad. Hopefully, that doesn't keep going, right?
Um, yeah. Thank you, Sean, for the $10 Canadian, right? Uh, saying Quebec has bagels. Also, Happy New Year. Well, thank you, Sean. It's really kind of you.
Quebec
From
does have bagels.
They do, right? And we, as our friend Koya said, like your money is good for syrup, which actually I could use. I'm running out. But thank you so much, Sean. It's really, really kind of you. I appreciate you being part of this community. All right, so let me read the topic. Okay. I hope you guys like it. Topic 1. New York has passed a law to crack down on quote unquote puppy mills. These are considered to be abusive breeders, which will now be able to sell their animals through not be able to sell their animals through pet stores. Instead, the bill encourages adoption or consumers buying directly from breeders. Pet stores are fiercely opposed to this legislation as it may put them out of business. Are you in favor of this bill? If not, do you think puppy mills should be shut down at all? Should society more broadly be concerned about the general welfare of animals? And should pets specifically be protected? So I'm sure everyone has heard of puppy mills. Sure you've seen like a news story like detailing like what goes on there. Um, I think so. This isn't the first time I've heard of legislation similar to this. I've heard it in other states, but yeah, New York has just passed theirs, and apparently it's going to take like 2 years to actually like be enforceable. Um, but this, I mean, it damages businesses. It also increases the price of an animal. Because like dealing with like a I guess a respectable breeder, I don't know, whatever. Um, like they cost money. And then there's adoption, but I don't know how the process. Maybe someone else knows how the process of like pet adoption works. But I imagine there's some money exchange there. I don't know. Um, but yeah, like should we be putting these stores out of work? If that is indeed the end result. Should that matter in the end? Let's start with our friend Lactoid, work our way around.
Yeah, so I'm against this bill. I don't think there should be any animal welfare bills introduced ever. It just seems blatantly hypocritical that we are perfectly fine slaughtering animals, but for some reason we have this weird cognitive dissonance where, well, these animals, they're our friends. We can't possibly hurt them. No, we own them. They don't have any freedom. They can't leave if they want to. The idea that they have any kind of rights, I think, is absurd. Um, I would remove all charges from Michael Vick along with my repeal of this law. And I think at the end of the day, this is just going to make things worse. It's just entirely based off of kind of knee jerk emotion. My guess is probably pushed through by the significant uh, voting population of pit bull owners, which seem to be very, very aggressive, much like their dogs, when it comes to trying to get anything done in terms to protect their beloved animals that statistically kill far more babies than any other dog breed. But yeah, overall, this whole thing just sucks. So I'm against it.
Amazing that a person who's so pro-gun will be talking about the the safety of these products. We'll leave it alone. We'll leave it alone. We'll go to our friend Corey. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have done
I don't have to chain up my gun, okay? I'm just saying.
that.
I can leave it right there in the open and nothing bad will happen.
Okay.
Well, so I can totally respect and to some extent appreciate the consistency from Lactoid, since there is totally a cognitive dissonance that most people display of like, yeah, they've carved out this set of animals and that we should protect those. But I also try to also be consistent in like, yeah, just as I don't support pretty much animal products, generally speaking, in any sense whatsoever, and have some pretty mixed feelings about pets, or rather, I think just as I think most parents are generally not good parents or suboptimal parents, I think the vast majority of pet owners are very much suboptimal pet owners, in my experience. And like, yeah, I think at the very least, if we're going to continue having pets, there should be a really high barrier to entry. If anything, maybe even some sort of license to have a pet. Since yeah, I think pet owners just give themselves a bad name. But also to put Canada on the map, but not for good things. Going to post an article in the Discord chat where, as usual, Canada/Quebec does it first, where I'm in the province known as the puppy mill capital of Canada. As in Quebec is notorious for its puppy mills and it's sort of its lack of legislation on pretty much clamping down on puppy mills. But yeah, they're bad. We shouldn't support them, and I'm all in favor of more protection for the sake of animal welfare. And I'll leave it there for now.
Okay. Fascinating. I had no idea about Montreal. I'm learning something here. Let's go to our friend Synth.
Yeah, sure. So, anybody who's super debate brained, and I'm including myself in that category, the first thing that our mind's going to jump to is it's kind of wild that we've got this arbitrary line around dogs and cats as like these are the animals that it's okay to care about, and all the cute ones is okay to care about, but the ones that we eat, those ones in specific, are the exclusive ones that it's just okay to just do whatever you want to. Um, the it's easy to go from that and to jump to saying like, okay, well, people are being inconsistent, which means their position's wrong, but only means that some part of their position is wrong. It doesn't mean that it's like either the case that you have to you have to like dismiss this law, or it's the case that you have to start you have to compassionately advocate against meat production or something. It's good to do. It's obviously good to reduce animal suffering, but holding this position doesn't necessarily mean that somebody has a contradiction in their view, because the change in your view necessary to become correct is just to become vegan. It's not to like start saying that animal welfare doesn't matter at all. That's just a jump. And there's this, there are arguments that are going to get forwarded like, well, yeah, but like that's hypocritical for most people to care about. And that's fine. Like there's plenty of things that are hypocritical for people to care about, and yet they still should care about it. So there's not really an issue there. This is people in the debate scene will like throw out this word like ad hominem a lot, right? An actual example of it is like an accusation of hypocrisy, right? It's the specific kind is called tu quoque, which just means like you also, like you're doing it too. Somebody else doing something wrong wouldn't justify the bad behavior. It's not like, okay, well, look, you're inconsistent, so it's the case that you must be just like your view needs to be thrown out. What somebody should point to is just, okay, well, now you have to pick one or the other. It's not the case that you have to throw out the view that it's like, wrong to cause animal suffering in puppy mills. It's just that you also have to accept these other conclusions. And if you want to go with the position of which bullet do I bite, the bullet of it's okay to rape dogs sometimes is probably a much bigger bullet to bite than just like, yeah, you have to be vegan.
Okay.
But that's it. That's all I gotta say.
And since we're definitely so low on participants today, I'll just say that I'm closer to Lactoid's position, but I'm really interested in hearing more of Synth's position. Maybe I'll be persuaded. Yeah, like I think that it's odd that we have this line of like we care about this group of animals, not this other group of animals. I think pretty much all animals are delicious. And it's and it's like a
Wait, can you
driving.
make that claim? Have you
I
tried them all?
I'm willing to do
I know you're
that.
willing. But I'm just saying you don't have the evidence to make that claim.
It's
The
true. I
first
don't
time.
have the data, but like I've interested in finding out. Um, and that's like it drives a lot of my politics here. So, but it but I don't prefer violence, like suffering, like needless suffering. If I can avoid that suffering, I will, right? And when it comes to meat production, which is not the focus of this conversation, that just means that like kill them faster, more ethically, so I can get into my tummy. But in this case, it would also seem that like, well, if puppy mills are inherently abusive, that it's not something I'd be for. So I'd want to get rid of them. But uh, but again, what Synth has said, that kind of makes me want to like change my position on or like not try to make all my positions line up perfectly here. And yeah, yeah, you've heard what I have to say, right?
Well, I mean, the thing though about the line being like arbitrary or odd to select out dogs, like I agree, it's totally arbitrary. It's completely irrational to select out dogs and be like, well, these are the ones that we're gonna select to protect. But the line of around what a dog is just as arbitrary as the line around what a human is. So we could just make the same argument over there. Like if it's arbitrary for it to pick out dogs as like, well, they're cute pets, so then we should not harm those, but we can harm all these other ones. Why isn't it just as arbitrary to pick out humans?
I agree. I think it is arbitrary. But if we can draw, I mean, if we're allowed to draw arbitrary lines, then I think I'll just draw them at humans. I'll just put it there. You know?
Yeah,
Go
it
ahead, Sim.
seems like, well, yeah, I totally agree that if we're just allowed to draw like arbitrary lines in the sand anywhere, right?
Mhm.
You can draw it wherever you want. You can draw it under humans if you wanted to, or you can draw it including dogs if you wanted to. But if we want to be able to look at people who are drawing the line, including humans and dogs, and say there's something wrong with their approach to ethics, then we'd also have to internalize that critique. We have to think about, okay, is there something wrong with my approach to ethics because it's just as arbitrary? The problem that I see in their view is a problem in my view, and some other views don't have that problem. I think that's kind of where the issue lies. It's just it seems like there's no real reason why humans any less arbitrary of a line than drawing it around dogs and cats and humans.
Uh, I just want to ask the question, I guess, both to you, Prime, and Lactoid, and in both your answers. So, in the movie 101 Dalmatians, is Cruella de Vil a villain? And if so, for what reasons is she a villain?
You go first.
I haven't seen the movie in a very long time. I'm guessing she's not a villain. If it's just against the dogs, I don't care. But yeah, I haven't seen the movie in a long time.
I mean, she's I guess I would say maybe she's an anti-hero or something like that. Like she like look, she has her desires. She wants a fancy coat. And why not use these dogs for that? Like they don't have any greater purpose than to make humans happy. So like she was working
Right.
on that. Yeah.
So like the villain part, like so usually it's framed as like the villain. Not only is it like she's stealing the puppies, but she's also trying to make a coat. As in, for her to be not a villain, it's not the coat part. It's the stealing. If she just had her own puppies, then everything is fine.
Exactly. It was a property crime she was committing. And Lacto and I don't like those, right? We hate property crimes specifically. So yeah, then if it wasn't for that, she could have gone to a breeder or a puppy mill or whatever, right? And gotten her own set of puppies and then made her coat. Simple as that.
And I'm also curious. Well, yeah, I think I know the conclusion or where your positions lie based off of this. But like, so at one point, I think whatever early 1900s, maybe 1800s, there was a whole anti-vivisection movement. As in, at some point, we used to like vivisect animals, like cut them open, and like at one point, um, dogs were used as in like to see like the pumping of the heart. We would like, kind of like string up a dog while it's alive and like slice it open while it's alive. Is that permissible to you? Like should that be resurrected? Could that be potentially resurrected today? As in all of the vivisection movement that took place, it's okay if we like go in the opposite direction.
That's a really good question. No one's ever asked me that. It's a really, really good question. I would say that it's permissible, but I would strongly, with the deepest possible words, like discourage that. And I would say that like that's causing unnecessary suffering, especially with like 3D renderings now. Like if you've ever seen the game like Mortal Kombat, one of the newer ones, right? We can very well draw the insides of a being, an organism, seeing the blood pumping, right? So we can provide those 3D models for educational purposes. I don't think we gain anything by having it done to a living being and increasing suffering. So I would hate it. I would absolutely hate it. But yeah, I guess it's permissible. Like to it.
I once saw a video on YouTube. It's probably still there. It's pretty graphic. It's a Vietnamese festival, like or annual tradition, where they take a pig and they tie ropes around the pig's legs and they spread it out like flat, like tight, basically. And they hack the pig in half with a machete, like right there in front of like a giant crowd of people that are all screaming. And then everybody runs up with money and they rub their money on the pig's blood because it's good luck and it's going to get you money later on through the year. I think it's like some kind of New Year's tradition or whatever. Um, Now, I don't know if that's legal in America, but I would legalize it. I not only for pigs but also for dogs. Um, I think the two arguments that one of which I think is particularly interesting, but one of Synth's arguments was, well, people can be hypocritical or inconsistent, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're wrong. It just means that they have two different ideas in their heads that are incompatible, right?
No, I
Where
didn't.
they
Sorry, let me clarify. My view is not that they.
okay,
It's just that they're not wrong on one particular claim. It could be either of them could be wrong. One of them has to be, but it doesn't entail that just one of them is. Like if I say like A and not A, right? It doesn't mean that not A is the correct answer. Like one of those has to be, but it's not necessarily the case that that A is incorrect or that not A is incorrect. You can't show from hypocrisy somebody's wrong on some particular claim they're hypocritical about.
you not necessarily, but I do think you can use that to like if somebody is genuinely trying to argue with me A and not A, let's just like make it literal. Let's say they're like A equals A and A equals not A, and then you ask for justification and they have no justification. I think that would be sufficient for me to question their judgment, right? At the very least, like you
No,
have a
I
lot of
totally
people.
agree. You can question their judgment if
Yeah,
they have no justification, but that's different than saying something like you can determine from that position that it's both the case that not A and not A. Like one of them has to be correct, right?
that's fair.
If you just mirror image the hypocrisy, you just end up being a hypocrite in the opposite direction.
No, it's fair, right?
Yeah.
One of them could be correct, and the fact that they are being inconsistent isn't necessarily determinative of the correct answer. Um, but it seems, I mean, do you agree with me that probably some significant portion of dog lovers and dog defenders, the people who are chanting for the head of Michael Vick, um, are not only not vegans, but they're probably aggressively not vegan, right? In my area, in my state, for example, people will almost get angry, like if they meet a vegan, like they'll get aggressive and want to
Get
destroy this
triggered.
person. They're triggered, yeah, absolutely. Like they hate vegans openly. I never understood that, right? I was like, oh, this is, are they wrong? And killjoy is a little bit, sure, but I mean, come on, right? You hate them. That seems a little bit excessive.
Yeah.
But like they also just are obsessed with their pets, and like they worship. I think there was one comment one time under. It was actually one of the funniest comments I saw. It was under like a BLM video, and like there was people marching, I think it was like in Flint or something. And one of the top comments was like, has anybody told the white people that there's dogs that also don't have access to clean water in Flint? Maybe that'll make them care. Because it's like, why like everything? People seem to fucking care about everything over like when it comes to fucking dogs over anything else. And I get it. Like you can have your obsessions, but it just, I guess, arbitrary evaluation of dogs. Sure, I can't argue against it, but it just feels like super fucking weird. It feels super weird. It feels super obsessive, and it seems like, are you really willing to like lock a human being up in a cage because they happen to breed a dog in their own residence? I was taking a look at the bill. Apparently, that's one of the things prohibited, right? If you're like a dog breeder and you're breeding them in your house and then you're selling the puppies and the cops come, that's illegal. And I'm assuming that they're going to arrest you at some point. So some of the people supporting this bill must be okay with locking a human being up in a cage if they happen to breed dogs in their living room. Crazy.
So saying that there's like some portion of the bill that you disagree with isn't going to be enough to justify disagreeing with the total, just the total stance of having there be no animal welfare laws at all, or no animal welfare bill ever introduced. But you said that you don't have an argument against that, but you do have an argument against that. In fact, you like went to it, which is just that it's arbitrary, and there's an issue with it being arbitrary. You could like picking your morals out of a hat. You could just have any position you want, sure. But there's an issue with that kind of method because there seems to be some kind of truth to morality other than just some weird arbitrary line around some sets of preferences
I'll be back.
that we can't really describe.
Okay.
Like if I asked you what is it that makes a rule a moral rule, right? Like what could you possibly answer that with? Like it's not just your preferences, right?
Well, it is just my preferences, and that's why it's
Like-
a little bit difficult, right? Because I understand that you could have somebody who just says, well, I have an overwhelming axiomatic preference for dogs, and that's above humans, and that's just my position.
Well,
I
it's
am
not
not
just
going to be
the
able to argue
preferences,
against this
right?
person, right?
You don't want to say that somebody's done something morally wrong just if they do something you don't prefer. Like there are plenty of cases we can come up with where the person obviously hasn't done anything morally wrong, but it's definitely something you don't prefer.
It's
Like,
about a
let's say-
level of preference, right? Like if an activity becomes so dispreferential to me that I begin to not even want this person to do it at all, or even exist if they do it, then it's like moving towards like the range of preferences that I'm okay with legislating.
It's not like there's not going to be a threshold of preference either. Like there are plenty of things we can come up with where you're like, yeah, I would prefer that not to have happened, but clearly there's nothing moral or immoral about it.
Yeah.
I'd prefer a person who's gonna like unknowingly get like 1,000 people sick. I prefer they just didn't exist at all, right? Because otherwise 1,000 people die. It's really easy to prefer one of those things, right? For you can imagine like you're one of the 1,000 people that dies. Now clearly you'd prefer that the person
Yeah.
didn't exist at all, but you wouldn't say that they're an evil person. There's still a separation there from the preferences you have and their morality as an actor. No matter how
Well-
strongly you prefer they don't exist, it's not going to make them an evil person.
Well, I think the activity is like immoral. The activity is dispreferential enough for me to want to legislate it. But in terms of characterizing whether or not somebody is a immoral person, I think this categorization has to do with their personality traits, their proclivity to doing certain things, which can include recklessness, right? Like what Typhus Annie or whatever it was, the woman who had like forewarning that she kept getting people sick and killing
Yeah,
people.
we're assuming the person did it completely unknowingly.
Completely unknowingly, right? So I
Typhoid
can't
Mary. Typhoid Mary.
Typhoid Mary, right? So, like, I would consider her to be like an immoral person because she had enough warning and knowledge to not do what she was doing, even though she didn't intend to get people
Yeah,
sick.
of course.
It was
Somebody doing
it was-
something negligent is morally wrong, but we're
Yeah,
talking about somebody who
exactly.
wasn't negligent. Like
Right,
they're
then
clearly doing something you don't prefer. And if all
Yeah, their
moral-
actions would be immoral, even though their intent, like in their personality, they may not be an immoral person. Because the problem is not like that I'm concerned about this person doing immoral acts in the future, necessarily. It's that the actions that they did, there's no way they could have known, right? So I'm not going to hold them personally at fault in the same way.
So what counts somebody if it's not just based on your preferences? You got some other definition for what makes somebody an immoral person that's not about your preferences, like a realist definition for
Yeah,
immoral
whether or
person?
not they have a proclivity to do actions in the future that are against my preferences.
Okay, whether or not they have a proclivity in the future to do it. So let's say it's a person who is infected, right? They're infected with some disease. They don't know it. They've done everything right. They've gotten other doctor's appointments. They've gotten triple vaxxed up.
All right,
that
let me
person-
narrow. I see where you're going. Let me narrow it. Let me narrow it
yeah,
a little bit
like
more.
just imagine the person has like all of the requirements all the requirements are met. So that person clearly could have had no idea, but in the future they're going to get a bunch of people sick. Like you definitely don't prefer it. Is it the case they're
Right.
an immoral person?
Well, so when a person, this is a critical element here. I guess to narrow this further, when I'm referring to somebody as an immoral person, I'm considering like their personality to be immoral, to like their person to have a proclivity to do immoral actions. Um, and if there's no way for their person to know that their body is infected, then I would consider them to be immoral person, right? Because the fact that other people are being hurt by this person, it's not like their personality that's the cause of this. But if they have any reason to suspect that they are the reason, or their person could prevent XYZ from happening through because of negligence, then I would consider them to be an immoral person to some degree if they go ahead and do the
Well,
immoral
no,
action anyway.
the person might not know the badness of the outcomes, but they still do have an intent to do a certain action, which is be a person who's going outside and walking around. And for that person, for them being that particular person and going around and walking outside, turns out that's a bad action. So you can say,
Yeah,
well, they don't intend to have the bad action, or they don't intend to have the bad outcome, but they do intend to have the bad action. They do intend to go
yeah,
outside and do the bad thing.
precursor, right? But I would consider the spread of disease there, like the coming in close contact, to be the negative action. And the question is, do they have any reason? Does the person have any reason to believe that this is an immoral action, or that there's, if they continue to do this, then an immoral outcome or a negative outcome may happen in the future. And if there's some reason to believe, then there is some level of immorality there, and then I would simply scale that with culpability.
So are you saying that this person, in order to have the intent, they have to know that they're doing something which is immoral, or just that they have to know that they're doing a thing which you happen to disprefer?
They're doing a thing that I happen to believe is immoral is sufficient for me to describe them as immoral. Otherwise, you run into an immediate problem of, well, what about somebody who just doesn't think murder is immoral? Then, obviously,
Well,
I would
the
consider
issue you have an immediate problem on either of those, right? In one case, yeah, you do have the issue of like, what about a person who just doesn't think it's immoral or just doesn't know that you don't prefer something, right? The issue in the other case though is if you want to say that they have to know that they're doing some action which you just happen to disprefer, well then they do know they're doing an action which you just happen to disprefer. It's the action of going outside. They don't know all the consequences, but they still know they're doing an action, right? And that action, which they know they're doing, is when you would prefer they not do. They don't have to know that you prefer it. So you have the same issue. You're like, either way, you have an issue.
So it's not about whether or not they know I disprefer it. It's about whether or not they know they're doing the action, and like the effect, they have some understanding of what the effect of that action is going to be. So like someone could say, well, I don't think killing people is immoral, but I know that if you point a gun at somebody and pull the trigger, they're likely to die, or there's some chance of them dying. Even if they don't believe it's immoral, they still know they still have intention to do the action, and they have some understanding of the effect. Therefore, I would hold them to the level of culpability, and then I would hold them responsible. So, in the case of, I don't know, here, right? If you knew that like breeding a puppy would lead to a puppy that happened to like live in subpar conditions, which this bill is pretty fucking broad and vague, which immediately makes me like uncomfortable when it comes to especially New York. But that is, because I don't have any moral preference against this. You could have the intent, like I'm going to breed this puppy, and I know the puppy's going to have subpar conditions, and I wouldn't hold them morally responsible. But you might, right? If you thought that they were committing some kind of moral wrong by breeding the puppy in these conditions. Obviously, you do, because I'm assuming that you support this law to some extent. Do you?
Yeah, I do. But I want to respond to something that you said. You said that your view is that it's about. It seems like now what you're trying to capture is if they know the effects that you prefer don't happen will happen, then it's the case they're doing something morally wrong. Then
Or
they're a
some
bad
risk
person.
some risk of the effects.
Yeah, if you want to go with that, you still have now you have like a new issue here, which is just that okay, what about a person who's like a solipsist? They just walk around, they just don't believe anybody else has experiences, they think they're the only person with a soul, and they just go around raping people. Are they not a bad person? It seems like they'd be a bad person to me.
Well, do they know that like hold on, do they know like
They're a solipsist. They don't think anybody else has a mind. They think they're like they're God, nobody else.
okay,
has
so
mind.
they
They're
have
a
no
huge
they have like
narcissist.
no like, and they're really deeply involved in this, so they have no possible way of knowing that another human being may have harm done to them.
They're a
Well, how
video
would you know
game
that?
player
Of course they
playing
don't.
GTA 5, right?
Yeah, they think
Like-
they exactly. They think they're like the life's basically a video game. They've seen no strong evidence to ever believe that there other people have minds. The only mind they have a direct experience with is their own, and so they just believe in solipsism. It's not because they're crazy or something. They're just like a little too deep into reading like philosophy papers or something, and they're going around raping people. Is that person not a bad person?
Well, so that's a tough one, because Yeah, I do think that you probably have to have some understanding of consequences in order to be held culpable for your actions. Although I think in the case of the solipsist, I think that this person is uh, in every real life example going to just simply be almost negligent by holding this position. But you could think of a hypothetical example where somebody truly has only ever received evidence their entire life that solipsism is real. Then I would not hold them responsible for their actions.
Look, if we're being honest here, right? You can imagine there's somebody out there who's like certainly a solipsist for good reasons. Like they just have a good argument or something that you haven't heard before. There's probably some argument that's better than that one, but they just have some good reason to believe it. There are plenty of people out there who probably do have good reasons to believe in solipsism.
Yeah, I would just re-educate
Yeah.
them. I wouldn't punish them.
Well, you probably wouldn't be able to, right? We can imagine there's plenty of people out there who are
Oh,
like
I'll be able
solipsists
to.
and let's be realistic here. There are like high level philosophers out there who've like written huge papers on this. They got all the arguments lined out, right?
All right, but have you? But in
You're not gonna be able to
1984,
change their
right? Like
minds.
we can change their minds, right?
Sure. You could try your best, but point being is like you understand if that person goes around and starts raping people, we'd say they're a bad person, right? Like we'd agree they're a bad person even if they are a solipsist.
I don't know if I don't think they'd be necessarily a bad person. No, I think that like because actions are bad that are happening, like we may have to like just neutralize the threat, sort of like a bear or like a tidal wave, where it's like now they're just a force of nature that's like causing harm. I'm not going to say like, well, the tsunami's a bad person. It's like no, the tsunami's not like a bad person. Obviously, it's not even a person. I would consider. I'm not. I don't think solipsists are actually necessarily immoral or bad people. I would just want to get rid of them.
Well, the issue with the tsunami isn't that it's not bad. The issue with the tsunami is that it's not a person. In the case of the solipsists, we both agree they are people.
Well, right, but the person is like you would agree that a person and then acts of something of even an acts of a person are two separate things, right? If you are under
Yeah,
the
I completely agree.
delusion, yeah, like if let's say I give you a strong hallucinogen, and then you become under the impression like you don't consent to the hallucinogen, you don't have no idea what it is, and then you come under this traumatic impression that that everybody's zombie is trying to kill you, right? I don't think you should be held responsible at all if you're just like blowing people away. And let's say you come out of the the hallucination, and now we're like, okay, do we arrest you? And you're like, look, I had no fucking idea this is going to happen. Should we arrest the people who like spiked your drink with a hallucinogen? Probably, right? Like, because then there's now we have like a reasonable cognitive kind of pathway for holding someone responsible. But I would not hold you responsible, and I wouldn't consider you to be a bad person. You were under an hallucination or under a delusion that was not you were not culpable. A solipsist, in my mind, is sort of in the same bucket, right? Like it seems like they're in this ongoing situation where they are, let's say, are like very convinced that like what they're doing is not necessarily wrong, and they've every reason to believe so. And so our two options, I would not consider them to be a bad person, but I would consider them like to be a natural threat, right, to society because bad actions tend to exist wherever they are. And while you get into some really dangerous territory when you start saying like legislating people based on how much of a threat they are. I think in certain circumstances like this, like the threat's sufficiently high enough where I would legislate that, but not in all cases, right? A psychopath who is not going around murdering people, but just like being an asshole, I don't think like that would be sufficient necessarily to arrest them or to throw them in a cage.
So for your ethical system, your normative ethical system is all centered around consent, correct? So if somebody doesn't believe in personal identity, then it's not the case they can have like a notion of what you're talking about when you say consent, right? It relies on what a person is for you, correct?
I didn't fully understand that sentence, but I'm going to go ahead and say
I'm
yes for the
asking.
purpose of this conversation.
Oh, sure. I'm just asking you if your notion.
Just don't hold me to it if I want to change my fucking mind. You've been pretty
I'll
good
just
so
rephrase
far.
it. I'll rephrase it for you just so we can make sure that you understand what
Okay.
I'm saying, because I don't want you to agree to something that you don't actually agree to. Your ethical system relies on a notion of personal identity, right? Like it's part of it. If you don't have a notion of what personal identity is, then your notion, whatever you're describing with consent,
Consent only applies to people. Yeah.
yeah, okay, perfect. So there's a lot of people in this field of philosophy who hold the same position that I do on this. I'm just an eliminativist on personal identity. I don't think there's anything to it. I've even talked to you about it before in the past. If I went to your house right now and raped you, would that not make me a bad person?
Were you under a hallucination that I
No,
was like?
I hold to a different philosophical position than you that you know I've got arguments for that you don't have counter arguments to because it's such a hard argument, right? The personal identity thing. It's a perfect example of the thing I was talking about with the philosopher earlier. Yeah, I don't believe in personal identity. I'm a fictionalist about it. I don't think it's real. I don't think it refers to anything. And so for your notion of consent, I've got my own notion that I think I would be violating. But I wouldn't be violating what you're talking about when you use the consent. on my view, because I wouldn't have that intention to do that.
So hold on. So if you think it's bad for any reason and you're violating that, then I would consider your person to be a bad person since you're doing something you know is bad. There's a level of culpability there.
So
if you have no reason to believe that it's bad, I wouldn't consider you to be a bad person.
But we cleared this up earlier, right? So you can't go with that definition because then there's the obvious answer that you were talking about being an issue earlier, which is like, okay, if somebody just doesn't know that murder's wrong, then they're not wrong for murdering someone.
Well, okay, that's fair. So if they don't, I guess the line here between know and believe is going to be difficult, right? So my standard would be like you really have to have no reason to believe that like murder is wrong, like it's going to be wrong in XYZ scenario in order for me not to apply any level of immorality to you. But if you have some reason to believe that it's wrong, right, which is going to be in every case except for somebody under an extreme delusion, like mental illness, somebody who's taken hallucinogens without knowing it, somebody who perhaps is like this kind of fictional solipsist that is truly, convinced completely and has no argument or no reason to believe that they are not the only person. Like in these scenarios, I wouldn't necessarily consider these people to be bad people. No.
Look, if you're saying
I would consider them to be like perhaps people that we can try to fix to like become almost people again, because
But
I don't
that
know
doesn't
because
get you out of the issue either. Like if you're just saying there's like any amount of reason, any amount of reason whatsoever to think it's morally wrong. Well, we all do that for every action. Every action we got some tiny reasons that count in favor of it being wrong, and then maybe more that count in favor of it being okay. So like it's easy to see that like okay, well like sometimes when you go places, there's some percentage chance that you might like run over another human being. So that's at least one small reason in favor of being
Sure.
wrong. If that's all that came about, you'd say like, okay, you shouldn't do that. It just has a risk of killing people, and there's no point. And then there are reasons that count in favor of it, and then we weigh those against each other. Now, if you're saying any reason whatsoever is sufficient to say that this action is now like something they have reason to believe is wrong, well, that's just going to include every action, and so you're back into the square one, right? That's just
it's gonna include every action. But what's the problem with that?
Well, then you're just back in square one. You've like now this amendment you made is now just means nothing. It's like, but only the actions which are every action. It's like saying of the subset of actions that I'm describing here, only the ones which are all of them.
Every action is a little bit different, right? So like, you would agree with me that aiming, if like you know what a gun does, and you aim it at somebody and pull the trigger, like your understanding of what's about to happen is going to be substantially more accurate than if you happen to like get in a car. Could there likely be like some head that pops up out of a pothole right when you're driving over? Sure, but like, what's the reasonable likelihood here?
What if they are unsure?
Well, if you go back to reasonable likelihood, then they're just the sociopath example just works again, right? And then we just have like, okay, well, imagine a person who just their reasonable likelihood is just that morals aren't real at all. It's whatever pleases me personally. And then that person just goes around harming people. They're not a bad person.
So there's a difference. There's a difference here between like whether or not you know the action is going to happen and whether or not you believe the action is wrong. When it comes to whether or not you know the action is like what specifically the action is going to happen, I give way more deference on that one in terms of like reasonable person standard. But then when it comes to whether or not you should know the action is wrong, like that one, I'm much more strict on, I suppose.
What about the interaction between those two standards? In the case of like, what if you're completely unsure if there's bullets in the gun, right? Like as far as you know, there's an equal chance of there not being a gun, or not any bullets, or there are being bullets, right? And you point it and you pull the trigger. Like what are your thoughts there? Like, does that change the calculus?
You asked me the lactoid.
Yeah, either of you. Yeah, but the lactoid, yeah. Basically.
I think that if you know the gun is loaded, it's probably worse because you have it like an intent there, and you are very certain of what actions are about to happen. I think firearms are dangerous, frankly, and so if you're pointing any gun at somebody, even if you're unsure if it's loaded, like there's some level of recklessness there, and therefore some level of immorality. I think that there is like a duty to educate yourself on the world and how you might harm other people. And so, if you are willingly keeping yourself ignorant, which I think is a fair assumption for when it comes to a gun, at least in most scenarios, with exception to perhaps children, I'm more than happy to hold you accountable. Yeah, I guess there is a gray area here that is interesting to explore, because somebody who truly has no, like there's, I guess, somebody who has no reason to believe Because the solipsist is less actually the solipsist is less of like a more of a moral claim, and I think more of almost like a factual claim, right? Because like the solipsist is arguing that they are the only person, and in a world like a video game where you truly are the only person, like I think any moral code would allow you to kill anybody else because they're not actually people. There's no problem with that, right? But if you have any reason to believe that there are people there and you are actively killing a person, um, then that would be wrong based on my own moral code. It's not a fact question, right? Because the fact is, you're killing another person. Now, you might disagree with me and you might say it's right to kill other people, but I say it's immoral to kill other people.
Well, in this case, the solipsist is not saying that it's right to kill other people. They're just saying there aren't other people involved, like the same way that I would on like
Yeah,
a
they're not
personal
killing
limit.
people, they would argue.
Yeah, I would say this. I would say the same thing, in that like I don't believe that persons actually exist. I think they're useful fiction that we socially invent. But the reasonable likelihood argument just ends up being like, I don't think there's a reasonable likelihood of anything happening involving persons at all. I'm like a eliminativist on the subject, so I'm not going to think it involves anything like that. So if I went into your house and raped you, the thing that you're talking about with consent wouldn't apply to anything that I'm intending to do, which ends up being an issue because I think we both agree if I walked into your house and like pinned you down and raped you, there would be something morally wrong I've done there, and I'd be a bad person.
There'd be something morally wrong you did. When you would agree that a person exists, even if you're going to like use a different definition of it, right? Like a person being simply a categorization we put over like human minds that meet certain thresholds.
That's like saying Spider-Man exists because there's like a mental categorization we have with Spider-Man. Like
There could be, yeah.
Well, there is a mental categorization of what we have with Spider-Man. It's like the guy in the red and blue suit who swings and he lives in Queens, but he's not real. So, like, even if you have a mental categorization, doesn't mean the thing that it's pointing to is something that's actually real and out there in the world.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to describe here is like, is there enough evidence for you to understand like that there is this category here that I have a very strong dispreference of you interfering with, and if you
Yeah, I think that the
interfere,
category you're talking about is not real, right? I understand you have a category in your head, and I understand there are objects you'll point to.
right,
And I
right,
can probably guess the next objects you're going to point to. I can be like, okay, that blob shape over there that's got two
sure,
arms and two legs, that's probably what you're going to call a person. But I don't
yeah,
think it actually is what you're calling a person. The thing you're calling a person, the thing you're actually describing is, okay, there's some kind of psychological continuity that exists over time. I don't think there is any kind of psychological continuity that exists over time. I don't think there's something that exists out there. I think you just have memories. I don't think those are going to count for what you're calling a person.
okay, but your
So
collection
I
of
don't think they
cognition and
exist.
memories, and et cetera, whatever words you want to use to describe like the human brain,
Yeah, but
like
that's that
you
just
would.
circular
Right,
because you
hold on,
said your.
hold on. Your synth, okay.
Right? It's like it's a
You're
loop.
gonna
It's
have to
just like a
bear
loop.
with me because I am a humble person who still believes in persons. So you're gonna have to like work with me here, in terms of like my language. I'm going to use your argument now. If you're saying,
Very,
well,
very
I
train your
can't make
police.
arguments because I'm not a person. Okay, synth, whatever. Okay, whatever the fuck. I'm asking you.
Okay, synth. Who is synth? Define it.
Oh my fucking god. So you would, as long as you understand what I don't want you to do, essentially, because I have my conception of morality here, where like there's persons that I value, you could say arbitrarily, that I don't want to be interfered with in specific ways, and even if you don't believe that like personhood has the same kind of significance, or if it's going to kind of like an amorphous definition, if you have the cognitive wherewithal, which I know you do, to isolate in that categories of what I would define as persons, to the extent of that I don't want you to go and interfere with them, then you know sufficiently. You know enough now, because factually speaking, you know what facts are going to occur if you do X Y Z action.
No. The issue is that I don't think that the thing that you think is happening when I go do what you're calling interfering with the person, I don't think there's any interference with the person happening. Right? That's the difference in the views here. It's like if somebody said something like, "I think it's wrong to kill things that have souls." When something has a soul, it's wrong to kill it, and that's what I mean by wrong. All I mean by wrong is you're killing things with souls. That's all I mean by that word. Um, then it would just be like a dispute on whether or not that's happening. Like if an atheist goes around killing people, he would just say, okay, I just don't think I'm killing anything with souls. And so that's where the position split is on the position of whether or not you are actually doing the thing that you're saying you don't prefer. Like I agree that there's a thing you don't prefer. It's not super clear if that's even happening. It's also not clear if you actually prefer that, but just granting you do, it's
Sure, the atheist, and I guess honestly, it would kind of depend on the point of view. I'm only here, I guess, to represent my point of view. If the definition is murder, we could both have different definitions here. Synth, maybe you don't think. I know you do think murder is wrong. Hopefully,
Yeah.
But let's just assume that you don't. Let's say, well, persons don't exist, and so eliminating what you would define as persons is actually not wrong at all. You're perfectly free to like have that position, and we can even discuss it. And maybe you can convince me that like I shouldn't value persons at all, even though I guess it's arbitrary. So good luck. So according to you, your action would not be wrong, but according to me, your action would be wrong. But I would only judge. I would only judge you. I would only judge you as a wrong person if you had no way to know that what you were doing would displease me. Right? Does that make sense?
No way to know that it displeases you?
No way to know that it would displease me. Hopefully, once I become dictator of the world, I'm working on it. It's a slow process.
Okay, that's really strange. I didn't think that was your view. You're saying that you're not a bad person if you didn't have any way to know that Lactoid didn't like what you did.
Yeah, but I'm categorizing this very broadly. So like, do you have some general idea that like people who Lactoid is a member of dislike XYZ action? If so, then you have some duty to investigate whether or not Lactoid thinks it's okay. And then you might say, well, what about like abusing a dog? A lot of people might say abusing a dog is wrong, sure. And so you have enough reason there to investigate whether or not Lactoid thinks it's wrong. And if Lactoid thinks it's wrong, then you shouldn't do it. But I don't think it's wrong. So I don't care if you do it or don't. And I'm not going to morally condemn you if you do it.
Okay, so let's imagine a person, they grew up in rural India. They've never seen Lactoid or heard about Lactoid. Do they have a duty to go figure out what Lactoid likes?
I think they have a duty to at least guess what Lactoid likes. And I think they have enough evidence to
How
do
would
so.
They don't know Lactoid exists. It'd be like having them guess.
No, but they understand like there's a concept of other people. Lactoid is a member of other people.
They don't know that. They don't know that Lactoid's a member of other people. They have no idea who the fuck Lactoid is.
I guess they don't know for sure,
Lactoid
right?
could be
But
a
they can
dog.
assume.
It could be.
Yeah, Lactoid, for all they know, Lactoid could be a dog.
Work with me here a little bit, okay? I'm trying to describe moral subjectivism in a sense of with an element of moral chauvinism here. So I understand what you're saying to some extent.
I can help you, Lactoid. If I can, they have access to the same faculties that Lactoid has, and therefore can probably presumably come to the same conclusions. Is that what you're trying to say? Maybe.
Well, nobody has the same faculties Lactoid has, so that's
True.
already.
Most people have much greater faculties, and therefore it's easier.
No.
Lactoid, just come home, become a realist, become a moral realist. We're right around the corner. It's so good over here. We have consistent views.
It's bizarre.
We can make fun of people for being arbitrary.
Yes. What do you mean by when you say we can make fun of people for being? What do you mean by people?
It's just a fiction. It's a useful fiction.
Yeah. So
it's a fiction. It's like if I said Spider-Man is cool. If I said Spider-Man is cool, you would be like, wait, you can have opinions about fictions? Yes. What? Somebody says Spider-Man is cool, and like he beat up the Green Goblin. You would be like,
how can morality be real?
Actually.
How can morality be real if people aren't?
It just doesn't have anything to do with people. Morals are about states of affairs. They're about things like the valences of states of affairs. They're about things like pleasure, and suffering, and true belief. It's not about why you should care about it. What should means is about making the world a better state of affairs. That's all that word means. It's just
for
the
who?
Action you should.
For who?
Yeah. What do you mean for who? What for who? What for who?
A better state of affairs for who?
It's not a for who. There's no for who involved.
Wait, hold on. Better state of affairs, in my opinion, or in whose opinion?
Not in an opinion. Not in an opinion.
What is a non-opinion better state of affairs?
So there's a property. The property things of pleasure and suffering, right? If I tell you this is what pleasure feels like, this is what suffering feels like, you can feel that there's a difference in at least one aspect about pleasure and suffering. That difference I'm talking about is the valuefulness or the valence, right, of these different things. I think pleasure has a positive valence and suffering has a negative valence, and we could totally imagine, we could conceive of other things having that valence as well, right? Having some good value, having some reason why they are valuable, some valuableness property. And so once you have that, you can just say something like, well, this world has more pleasure in it. You ignore how many people are in it. Ignore all of that. Just see, does this world have more pleasure? Or does this world over here have more pleasure? Pick the world with more pleasure, less suffering, and more true beliefs, and you'll be in the better world.
I have infinitely more pleasure from abusing dogs, specifically breeding them in my living room in substandard conditions and then selling them to buyers, okay? Doing this brings me immense pleasure. Like, would you agree that by stopping me, wouldn't stopping me actually reduce overall pleasure and therefore be a category?
This is like if somebody was like, oh yeah, you're utilitarian. Well, what if I just like told you that I got like a lot of pleasure from rape? I just love it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
like they're not gonna, I just don't believe. I just don't believe that's true, right? I just think it's obviously
Oh,
false.
hold on, no. Hold
Now,
on.
if you wanted to give me evidence, we can trade the evidence with that and figure it out.
I played with the
Yes,
hypothetical.
if you're asking me under the hypothetical, is it more obviously it's morally under utilitarianism, right?
Great.
What?
So I'm here since to convince you that I derive tremendous amounts of pleasure
If
from
you
breeding
can
dogs.
convince me that you just get so much more pleasure than the harms caused by it, I would be on board with it. It's just that we have plenty of empirics saying it doesn't.
Hold on.
Okay, we'll read the fanfics and we'll evaluate if Lactoid is
Evaluate,
like
how
just
sincere I'm
busting
being.
left and right. He's just like spewing all over the screen when he sees the puppy mills.
I just have a question for Lacted. Yeah, to maybe recenter the conversation a little bit. Although we're probably going to circle back to this. But I'm curious, Lactoid. Say you had a child. Okay, it's your own child. And you saw it, let's say, kicking a dog. Would you correct that behavior? Or what would you do?
I would be concerned. My understanding is that abusing animals tends to be correlated with like later behavior when it comes to people, and that's my ultimate concern. Like if I took the kid to the psychologist and the psychologist was like, "Yeah, there's no actual there's no problem here." Let's just say I was sufficiently convinced that kicking the dog like wasn't actually fucking the kid up, then I would let the kid kick the dog as long as the dog was my property as opposed to like my neighbor's property, because that'd be trespassing. And that's like a deeper philosophical lesson that I want to instill in the child.
Right. Respecting other people's property. But yeah, if it was a dog with like a stray dog and they were like, let's say we've now resurrected the vivisection practice and they children can do some pretty horrific things like they want to string up a cat and cut so you would not correct that behavior. It's like, hey, have at it.
I actually think that I was watching some documentary on Toy Story, and the character of Sid is like the villain, right? But in reality,
it's like Cruella de Vil's not a villain, really.
But Sid was actually crafted with by the writers with the intention of being like a creative outcast, and that in reality, like Sid is really not a bad person, right? I know they definitely come across like a bad person, but they're not. It's not actually like the underlying character profile is not supposed to actually be a bad person, which I think is why Toy Story is so fucking good.
Yeah, I agree. At least
I think the same thing with children, right? I think like dissecting animals is a great way to learn biology. I think
same with children. Dissecting children, great way to learn biology.
You're right, but I value children, right? This is the difference, right? So I would have no problem if my child was like dismembering hamsters or something to like see what would happen. But
if they were,
I feel like even if you don't value hamsters at all, you can still say there's like bad dispositionary effects of
Like what if
there could be? There could be.
There probably are, right?
What if it wasn't like
probably are
amount of like mental curiosity? It was just like pleasure, right? Like I gain pleasure. Yeah, actually, this works out really well. I gain pleasure from dismembering.
I'm having so much fun, like vivisecting these dogs and cats.
Just fun. There is just like a satisfaction of like seeing this poor animal suffer in the most brutal ways that I can think of. You think, I'll just leave it there before I move on to that hypothetical.
I would actually try, and I mean this sincerely, because I think we've successfully done this with eating meat, which is frankly like a pretty like gruesome practice if you really take a look at it. If we can sufficiently separate, if I can through multiple lessons sufficiently separate in this kid's head, like you can do this shit to animals but not to people, right? If I felt convinced there, then I would actually have no problem with it.
Have you considered that in the case of the factory farms, we just don't see those? Like it's really easy to put them out of sight and out of mind because they're literally out of sight. It's like they don't print them on the packages or something.
Yeah, well, sure, but like I think that even slaughterhouse workers, for example, aren't necessarily, although they have a higher risk of like PTSD, illness, mental, psychological, for sure, no doubt. But they're not all murderers, right? They're not like, oh, well, I can eat a cow, therefore I can eat a person. I don't think they think that way.
No, but it definitely has a damaging effect to their mental health, right?
Like I've dismembered a deer, for example, but I don't think it's okay to dismember a human being, even though like I was right there in the process. If I had a kid that was dismembering hamsters, like as long as I'm convinced they're not going to like start dismembering people later in life, fine.
See, that's really weird. I think in a similar setting to what deers are in, I think under any setting under which I'd be okay with like hunting deers, I think it'd be okay with like hunting people, right? Like it's like, okay, what if you have to for survival?
Wait,
you just
what?
need to Yeah, of course. You have to
I
for
do not need to
survival,
hunt.
it's fine.
I do not need to hunt deer for survival, but
Yeah,
I
you don't
have
need
killed a
to, but
deer.
you can say that there's. But I think there are arguments that at least the hunters like to make of something like, well, yeah, but it's like better off for the deer population. Like they're
It
overpopulated, they're harming
is.
themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you want to make an argument like
I
that,
would
you
not do
probably
that for
want to.
people. I would not do that
If
for
people
people.
were, if people were like gonna
Would
kill
you
every
use that
pug-
argument for people, Seth? Because you've defended hunting before on that basis when it comes to.
I would use that argument for people. If people were going around and killing off people, made everyone else's lives better, I'd be like, yep, fucking mow them down. Just turns out it doesn't.
I mean, I think that force. Well, first of all, I would like to share. This is my opportunity to share some research. Like what you are doing. This is like known in the psychological research. The denial of mind to animals. Like this is a known phenomenon that people use to justify.
Simp denies minds to people. Like this is he's
No, I did
everybody.
Other way around. I deny people to minds. Okay, I think
You're right.
minds are certainly out there.
My bad. Yeah. Homo sapiens, sapiens, etc. I don't know.
Well, yeah, exactly. Like we've gone through this before. Like I think you have. I think you would have eventually a hard time because like you just want to say, well, it's just humans. That's a simple question to answer, right? I mean, that overlaps with like the abortion question.
It's a categorization, yes.
Yeah, exactly. Like at some point, like you will exclude what would traditionally be considered some people that you wouldn't be.
All categories are on spectrums.
Okay, fair enough. So like the elephant man, like that's fair game. You might like hunt that person.
No, you cannot hunt hold on. First of all, the elephant man's a poor example because he had like full use of mental capacity.
What if he was retarded and also was the elephant?
Yeah.
Well, no,
I'm
still
not sure how people feel about the word.
Yeah, so and I'm not just saying this for Twitch. I'm saying this,
No, but
I genuinely believe it.
Yeah, but
like
think of it this
when
way.
I say human, I'm saying like the range of like things that include all humans. Like that's
the word humans in your definition. Right?
But so think I'm trying to like paint the picture. Let's say I can't remember the exact language that the elephant man spoke, but let's say you spoke a different language. Okay, like does that now become fair game? You can't communicate with this person. Well, this presumed potential person.
Sure.
How do you recognize how
you can use this reductio to always shrink the categorization because a category is going to be in a spectrum. And a spectrum, by its very definition, it has no fixed points, right? And so you draw categories around certain elements of the spectrum. Now you can say, well, couldn't a racist use this argument to simply shrink the categories and only value white people? They could, right? And under their moral system, like if they truly believe this, then they would obviously believe that like morality should only apply to white people. Now you could have vegans who expand this to mammals or reptiles or fish. And then you could also have like those crazy fucking like Buddhist monks or whatever that cover their mouth with like fabric because they don't want to inhale mosquitoes.
Yeah.
Because they include mosquitoes in their like moral consideration. Yeah.
Like when they're walking around, they like make sure they don't literally step on.
And then we can go even further beyond that, like microbes, like are viruses even alive? Well, by some definitions, if they're alive, do we have to? It's like Schrodinger's moral value. Like if they're alive,
the value isn't coming from life on the vegan view. The value is coming from the fact that they have experiences. So viruses don't, and it's in question as to whether or not some bugs do, right? But if you want to like say like, okay, well, like if you just want to be totally consistent, you'd also have to value like if a bug can suffer, you have to value the suffering of that bug, and I do.
What do you mean by an experience?
All I mean by experience is just so the things that we're having right now, we have like a first-hand account of them. I'll give you an extensive definition, which is like the thing that's currently going on right now, where you feel like you have these like perceptions. All those perceptions are experiences. So what it feels like, that like what it's like, this kind of
in the room right
that's the
in the room right now with us. Experience.
We're qualia denialists now. That's even that's too much for me. Even like qualia is like, come on, like that's I like first-hand access is right there, right? But like the notion of there being first-hand access, now that's another thing. Personal identity, that's a whole different thing.
But also, I'm curious.
I think bugs have experiences done to them, right? I mean,
some
ants
of them
certainly have
do.
some level. Ants certainly have like memories. Like,
yeah, in the case of, well, it's not actually clear to me whether or not the ants in particular do. I'll grant it, right? I'll just assume they do. For the actions that I do, I think that the amount of pleasure and suffering those ants experience over the course of their life ends up being relatively small. So small considerations can be easily enough to outweigh that. Such as, for example, I don't want all my food eaten because it's gonna really, really fucking suck for me. Like money I could have put towards something more effective. Now I have to go buy bread again because of the fact that ants ate it or something, right? It's easy to say like, okay, I'm weighing them into it. It's just they don't weigh very much.
So the more suffering that a being can incur, the more you care about it.
Generally as a heuristic. It's not it's like if a being is like going to experience a lot of suffering or something, and one being isn't, I would just say like the suffering's bad regardless, right? It's not a matter of like, yeah, I value the being and then multiply the being times the suffering or something. It's just how much suffering is there. If there's a lot of suffering, it's really bad. If there's only a little bit of suffering, it's not that bad. If I stub
Uh,
my toe or something, it's like, yeah, it's probably like about as bad as it is for like like I'm not gonna like ruin aspects of my own personal life to avoid ants stubbing their toes. I just don't think it's like that big of a deal for ants. I think there's probably some amount of consideration that's worth considering though.
and Prime, I would actually even like pose the same question to you that that I did to Lactoid in terms of like, if you had a child and you witnessed it abusing animals, like would you correct the behavior, or it's like similar to Lactoid, you'd be like that's fair game, or it's like your corrective action would be like, hey, listen, little Timmy, that's okay, that's permissible, but the line is people. So keep you do you, but just make sure it's not a person or someone else's dog or cat.
It's not easy for me. So because I want to reduce suffering in general, and avoid unnecessary suffering, I'd say, hey, we don't want to make animals unnecessarily suffer. Um, that like if you want to impose suffering on something, then it needs to be. Mm, even then, it needs to be for a purpose, and it needs to be as short as possible. So if it's going to be, so we're talking about animals, right? Like if you're going to eat it, then I understand the desire to eat it because it's really tasty. Um, but like just end its life. Don't don't torture it. Don't do any of that, right?
What if somebody
Um,
told you that when they torture the animal, it tenderizes the meat? Would you think that's a justification, or would you say that's still wrong?
that's
This is literally the this is like not exactly comparable, but when it comes to lobsters, for example, like the meat's fresher if you cook them alive. Why not do that?
um
My
uh
pleasure is far more pain than the lobster has. I don't
Well,
know.
honestly, what
There's
if
no way to
somebody
know that, but I'm guessing based on like
what if
how
somebody
much
just
I
says like,
love.
yeah, I'm just a fucking prick, or like I just like seeing the lobster. It makes me feel a little bit happy to watch the lobster like freak the fuck out in the pan. It's like it's kind of fun when I'm
Sure.
cooking.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what about that? Do you think that person's like that's okay? That's enough to justify it, or do you think okay, maybe there's like some amount of good it has to be before it
Well, no, no, no.
justifies it?
So, but I'm sent. Like, I don't value the
Oh no, I know
lobster
you
at
don't.
all.
I'm asking
Yeah. Yeah.
Prime. Yeah,
Sure.
I'm asking Prime. Because Prime's gonna say like torturing a dog for like if you like I don't know if you just like jerk off to it or something, it's probably still bad.
Pussy.
I'm guessing.
uh,
You
Real,
never know.
real,
You never
real
know.
men
Somebody's out
get
there.
off the
Real
dog.
men. Michael Vick. I'm just saying, he was a real man, wasn't he?
I strongly disagree.
um
Dude could tackle us all of everyone here and just crush us. Okay, dude is a real man.
yeah, yeah. And Lactose associates being a real man of violence. Just like another look into a psychology.
How many
there.
guns does Michael Vick have? Can you answer
More
that
toxic
question?
masculinity. More toxic
That's
masculinity.
unbelievable. Okay. So animals are here for um uh well I mean I'm I'm sorry.
We
So
love you. Apologize for it. It's your show.
no. I mean, like, I just apologize to all of you for not being like eloquent and being decisive here. Um, uh, because I feel like my opinion shifts on this, like every time I discuss it, right? So I know Sith and I have had this conversation before, and I'm sure there's some sort of like moral drift happening with me here, but um, uh my I guess one of my problems is certainly that like it's a sign of like psychopathy, right? The torturing, that would be like my largest concern. Honestly, my largest concern is that hey, this probably lead to something awful down the line. But then the next question is, okay, well, what if it doesn't? And we can be positive that there'll be a otherwise morally upstanding person.
So imagine they're like terminally ill or something, right? Like, they just won't have enough time for those psychological impacts to really have any kind of harm. Like in the meantime, they'll just enjoy it. They'll just like have fun killing animals.
Like a Make-A-Wish Foundation, yeah.
Yeah, Make-A-Wish for sociopathic kids. They're just like beating dogs to death with shovels.
Yeah, my last final wish is to just club a bunch of non-human animals. I would not support that. I think that's pretty monstrous. And like,
Why?
and even then, the fact that you're like,
What?
why do you have?
Wait. I'm genuinely curious. Do you think any normal person would ever think it's monstrous to kill dogs? What? Are you crazy?
Hold on, the fucking dog lovers, sure. The kind of assholes that went after Michael Vick. But Corey, I want to hear from you on this a little bit. What's your? I mean, well, never mind. You're a fucking vegan too, aren't you?
Like technically not, but like, yeah, I don't defend it.
What do you mean technically not?
Like my whey protein contains dairy. That's pretty much
fucked up. So fucked up. Worst thing I've ever heard anybody do, actually.
So you're okay with torturing cows for the consumption of protein?
I'm not going to justify it. No, as in like, I, according to my own moral code and values, I am acting suboptimally. Like, I can fully be transparent about that.
Actually, at the farms where Corey gets the whey from, they rizz up the cows with like slow R&B music first, so it's actually totally consensual.
But like, there will be a point where yes, I will buy purely vegan protein. Yes. As in that's why I said like I have no problem saying that Synth is a more moral person than I am.
Say it again, but louder. Nobody believes it.
Yeah, Synth is a more moral person than I am. Like I can be honest and transparent about that. I'm not going to try to use a bunch of mental gymnastics to justify my position. Just as like, yeah, I think at the end of the day, okay, here's what I observe going on. Because if I ask you the question, Prime, okay, we generally overlap politically. If you just met a random stranger and they said they were vegan, where would you place them on the political spectrum?
No,
if you were a betting person.
No, probably leftist. Yeah.
Right, because it's no surprise. There's a clustering effect, and there are good reasons for that. That generally speaking, okay, left-leaning people have a larger, generally speaking, okay, these are not universal rules, but they have a larger circle of compassion.
They also have lower testosterone too. Do you think that's related?
And bigger brains, which is also related.
Well, we can get it. You want to compare?
I actually have a study I can send you. I have a study that I can send you that like the study was they actually gave like a test group testosterone, and after that their politics shifted markedly conservative after they were administered testosterone.
Yeah, there's also social dominance orientation, where like there's a reason why also with conservatives they believe in like hierarchy. And like
humans on top, animals,
or white people on top, and black people.
Let's not go too far.
Yeah. That never happened.
I'm the one here supporting Michael Vick. Okay, all right. None of you support Michael Vick. You guys are advocating for locking up a black man.
Blackboard's like, actually, I think it was cool that OJ killed his wife. That's how much I love black men.
Well, if he did it, okay. But no, when it comes to fanatics, convince me. Anyway, when it comes to Michael Vick, though, right? Like I'm defending him, right?
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like generally speaking, whatever, veganism, vegetarianism is generally speaking, a largely left-wing political belief. Where I would say that's almost at this point sort of like a litmus test for it. But like I understand, just as most people do, since they derive pleasure for it, like they will go through the mental gymnastics to like justify it. But I'm not going to do
that. Okay, all right. I want to get back to the question that was asked to me, and shout out to our friend Cynthia for all. I love how he can like turn the philosophical screws on someone. I've seen him do this multiple times, and it's a skill of his.
The issue with it is that it only works against people who are able to think about philosophy. If you just try doing this to a dumb person, it doesn't work at all. You're gonna get really mad.
But I did eat breakfast, so I don't know what you're talking about.
What do you mean? I have breakfast. I don't get it. I don't understand.
Is this a callback to an actual conversation?
There's this meme of people not being able to engage with hypotheticals, and you'll ask them this like the hypothetical text, which is just, if you didn't have breakfast this morning, how would you feel? And some people are like, what? I don't understand. I did have breakfast. No, but I did have breakfast. I'm not hungry. I had breakfast. I don't get it.
This occurred on the panel. You probably know what the rest, but remember when Lactoid, I think, was schools and like talking about 2 schools to like
Yes, it did.
imagine multiple schools, but no, there's and like
There aren't.
but just think of it. Just think of it as some sort of imaginary noose, not to call anyone out. But that was like but you, generally speaking, people who don't want to engage in hypotheticals, it's because like, yeah, they don't want to go down. They foresee the uncomfortable route that'll bring them to, and so they like, yeah, they
No,
want to.
I guess I pride myself of always like going down these hypotheticals. Unless it's like not pedantic is probably not the word I'm going to be used. But it's used to like destroy a conversation, that like you could just like keep throwing out like hypotheticals and to like stop the conversation from ever progressing. Then it annoys me. But beyond that, yeah, sure. So I'm going to do this. I'm not going to dodge. So I'm hearing Corey's words ringing in my ear. That people like go through mental gymnastics to make things to justify these things, and basically what that's revealing is that the other person, at least like the more vegan side, is actually more like moral in the end, and they recognize that to a certain level, and they're trying to avoid dealing with that. But I don't think it's more moral. I don't, right? My only problem is of my general idea of removing suffering. But I think to eat is to live. And I don't think there's
True, Synth does not eat. He's not living
You can
right
tell.
now.
You're surviving. You're not living.
yeah. And I put humans and other, it's not sentience is the word I'm looking for. What's the other word? Not sentience, it's the other thing.
Consciousness?
It starts with S. People
Synth.
No,
Oh my
synth.
god.
Synthiness?
No. People are think it's the word sentient, because I've made this mistake like 10 times. When people look out to say like, oh, this is a sentient being, they usually mean this other word. Like because they're getting the definition correct.
Not sentient.
It's just
Conscious.
S. Oh my god.
Sapient.
Sapient. Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you. Sapient's what they're looking for. Yeah. I put other sapient beings on a different level. I feel like our experiences, our way of interacting with the world, are qualitatively different, and because of that, we have different moral considerations. In fact, that we can have moral considerations. And these in this high level thinking. But so I say that like going back to what I was asked specifically, I would discourage my child from torturing an animal, only because I think that level of suffering is like um un unneeded. But that's only due to my preferences. Because I think eating is something that is paramount, right? And again, eat is to live. So I'm fine with like suffering, if it's not possible, or for that amount, right? Now, eating better, I think, is a really interesting question, right? Like the idea that like suffering might add to enjoyment. I guess I could understand that to a certain extent, but I run into like, well, what like if would I cause a being infinite suffering, right? For some sort of marginal increase in like flavor, I wouldn't, or even well, I'll leave that a marginal increase in flavor. I wouldn't. I think there's a balance here, and I don't know where exactly that lies. I'd have to be in the room as this torturing is happening, I guess, to try to figure that out. But yeah, I hope I answered the question.
I think that
yeah.
answers that. But like, oh, you go first. You go first.
Well, so I'm curious, Prime. Like, have you ever watched like any sort of like whatever Slaughterhouse or any
Yeah.
vegan investigative? I'm like Does that like? I'm curious in terms of like your reaction. You're like, so do you also see? Do you see the red bloodlust? Like, oh, this is I need more of this content. I need more. Or like what? Or is it just like neutral? Is it like, oh, this is just like watching, a commercial. Like,
I wonder if there is a way to um, both to find a balance between efficiency and suffering. That because there's a certain level of efficiency that has to happen for a slaughterhouse to to function. But I'm wondering if there is a better way that would reduce suffering. If there is a way to do that, then I would definitely move to that direction.
yeah, but isn't that almost like a tacit admission that like, given the fact that, at least from what you described, you're not at least deriving pleasure from it, and if anything,
Certainly
it seems
not.
like you'd prefer
I
not
will
to see
later
it.
on.
Yeah, you will later on. Uh, but it also doesn't seem like you're actively seeking it out. Like, oh, I love this. I love seeing these horrific conditions. And then like, yeah, all the whatever cramped birds or
It,
like
it if we could provide like chicken's hotel rooms, right? And like concierge service for each single one, right? For their lives. And then like snap our fingers and they just die, like lie down immediately and they're dead, right? And then we can sue them. Then I would do that. Right? I would
okay,
give them
sure.
But the businesses get your money either way. Why would they ever care about making the lives better? Like the only way to stop them from putting the animals in these really, really terrible conditions just ends up being not paying for it. How do you deal with it otherwise?
Sorry, are you saying the businesses don't care? Could you repeat that? I
Yeah,
missed
I'm just
it.
saying, like, as long as the businesses at the end of the day are still going to get your money, regardless of how they treat the chicken, which they are, because you're paying for it now at least. Why would they ever improve the conditions of the chickens? What reason do they have?
Oh, I mean, like that would be social pressure, like legislation. I wouldn't simply rely on that. I mean, I'm relying on markets to like reduce suffering. That never fucking works.
Well, I think
So
boycotts do. Consumer boycotts can sometimes work as long as you have like an actual goal, right? They can be part of a larger scale operation. Like all if you at the end of the day all a strike is, and strikes do work, right? All a strike is just you're depriving a company of one resource, which is your labor. If you
as
deprive them of the means through which they buy labor, then it's also going to harm them. If
as
you boycott an entire industry, then you can have some harmful effects on the industry and like at least diminish the degree to which they do bad things.
sure, Corey, don't forget your next question because I know you had one. So maybe write it down so we don't forget. Um,
Mhm.
so one, I don't think like if there's a protest that we need to be asking for something in particular, what are we asking for? We're asking for less suffering in the slaughterhouse, which I think is admirable. But like we have to be able to do that. You know, if you're meat eaters, right? If it's a meat eater boycott, you have to be able to do that with an idea of how can this business function in a manner efficient enough to provide us with that food, or we could just if it's government slaughterhouses, which I'd be in favor of, lactose not so much, then we don't have to worry about necessarily making a profit. Then that changes things. So
You're alone on that, by the way.
yeah,
Everyone here in the panel, except for you, opposes government slaughterhouses. Just maybe for different reasons, okay? But we all oppose government slaughterhouses.
oh, okay, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I guess you're right. Well, then, yeah, I think that food should be a human right. Yeah, to eat is to
Sure.
live. So I'd be in favor of government slaughterhouses, and they can be less efficient. And
Well, the
but
issue is
You can
Right.
just
say
ship the poorest beans. They can survive off beans.
well, genuinely, you don't have to have slaughterhouses to be able to meet people's food needs, right? Like, if anything, it's harder to meet food needs if you have to filter all of the vegetables through a cow that then like walks around and uses a bunch of the calories up, and then you eat the cow afterwards. Just going direct from like, okay, I'm gonna grow some food and then put it on plates. It ends up being a lot cheaper and a lot more efficient at meeting people's food needs. Also, it's like you don't end up having this huge negative externality, which is the suffering from the slaughterhouses, which we both seem to agree are bad.
no, it's efficiency within the terms of like a media industry. It's not that I'm looking simply on the axis of maximum efficiency. If that was the case, then I agree with you. Then like we could do the Snowpiercer thing and just like have like a bunch of roaches or something. I don't know, right? And, like have gelatinous cubes. And
Yeah, we
just eat
care about the
that,
joy
right?
of the food, but we have to compare how much more joy is this type of food giving us in comparison to
It's
how much suffering it causes. Is it
giving
worth
me a
the
fuck
good?
ton of pleasure. All right, it's giving
Have
me
you
a
had
lot.
look? Just compare the amount of difference between like
I hope that
you
F
could
word
probably
is
pick.
used figuratively. That
Can I ask
And
them?
indeed.
Can I ask them? Let's say,
Yeah.
like, let's say for myself, like, if I can convince you, and maybe I could actually convince you this, that I genuinely do derive significant more amounts of pleasure from eating meat than any kind of like I guess uncomfortability I have, or potentially even suffering of like the cow or the deer or whatever the fuck. Um, like then I at least should be allowed to eat meat, even if
It would
other
take
people probably shouldn't.
it would take a whole lot of good feeling that I don't think anybody's ever experienced from food, even really good food, to make that justified. But if that was the case, then absolutely. I don't think it's anywhere close to the case. I think the amount of gains you get for the difference between an Impossible Burger and a ground beef burger, I think it's not clear to me that you get any gains at all, other than the fact that you probably have like some placebo taste effect from the flavor of the ground beef being something you're more used to or something like that. The actual flavor difference is pretty small. I barely notice any. The amount that I do notice are just improvements on the side of the
Isn't
Impossible
the
Beef.
Impossible Burger
So
like packed with like sodium though? Like I'm pretty sure it's pretty
both of those are going to be pretty unhealthy for you. If we're comparing Impossible Burgers and we're comparing that to ground beef, both of those are things that are pretty unhealthy for you.
I've had
One of them
Impossible
contains
Burgers.
carcinogens. You could have had Impossible Burgers, and all I'm talking about is the health, right?
It
In terms
wasn't
of the
good
health,
though.
okay, you could say you don't think it's personally good. If you want to say like all of the ground beef alternatives, all of those are just so much different than the actual ground beef that it justifies the tremendous amount of suffering the animals are in because I get the inverse amount of pleasure out. I just don't believe you, right? Like it's just really hard for me to believe that because I've never experienced that from any food. Like I'm probably like a skewed case. Like I probably enjoy food less than most people, but I don't think anybody is going to be experiencing so
Well,
much joy from food that they'd be like, yeah, in order to eat this food, I would live under Guantanamo Bay-like conditions
so
for 10 months.
isn't your opinion here sort of hampered by your own lack of, I guess, like it reminds me of Ratatouille, right? Where you're like the rat that has like the little fireworks when you eat food, right? But I am like the rat that when I eat food, like the massive fireworks, right? Whereas
No,
they
I don't think you are
experience that
that.
because no, you there's no way you could know without being
There
me
is.
how
No, there
much
is. Like I'm not
incredible
a solipsist.
flavor and taste that I get. Like my taste buds could just be better. Like couldn't they be?
Look, the idea that you
They
just
could
have
be
like
one of those super
wildly
tasters,
different, yeah,
Blacktoid.
you have wildly different taste bud biology, and you have taste buds so good that you'd be willing to endure the conditions the animals are put into for that same amount of time. That just seems unlikely to me. But if you are, we can test it right here and right now. Will
Wait. You
you
would
live
agree
in
that
my
I'm
basement for 10
No,
months in
no, because
Guantanamo Bay-like conditions,
I would suffer.
and
I
at
would
the end of
suffer
it, I will
more.
give you one ground beef burger?
I
Deal?
would suffer. I would suffer. Well, no, my time is worth more than that. Okay, first of all. Second of all, I would like. I would suffer much more. I would even under your system. I think than like a cow would, right? Because a cow is much less aware of its
Yeah, we can imagine
circumstances.
that it's a much shorter period. We'll imagine instead of it being 10 months, imagine it's like a couple of days in Guantanamo Bay-like conditions. Would you trade that off for a burger?
I would trade one. I think the comparison would be like 5 seconds in Guantanamo Bay for a
Don't even think it's
burger
close.
compared to like 10 years for a cow because my consciousness is that much superior to a cow's.
So
Like
how
human
can
beings
I-
are
I-
like superior creatures, like
I
compared
don't
to
know.
other
I don't
animals, right?
understand why
So I
there
don't understand
has
how
to
you
be
can
this.
make these wild, outlandish guesses about the psychologies of cows, but I can't just induct from the fact that we're human beings and probably have a pretty similar.
You're
biology.
making guesses too. Your guesses are, I think,
I'm not guessing,
wildly
I'm
the other
inducting.
way. Yeah. And,
No, I'm not
well, I'm
guessing, I'm
inducting too.
inducting.
Then I'm deducting, inducting, whatever fancy word
you
you
said
want
it
to
was
use for
impossible.
guessing here.
But you
Whatever
said it was
fancy word you want to
impossible.
use for guessing here. Okay, I'm telling you, like me in my analysis, I could be wrong. In my analysis, like even under your system that I don't agree with, but I'll play with it. Even under your system, the amount of pleasure I derive, I think, is much more significant than the suffering that, especially like a fish or like a lobster or a crab goes under. I would even
Like
argue
I
a
can.
chicken, definitely a cow.
No,
I mean,
not
like
okay. You can't be timid on chicken and then say definitely cow. Like, come on now. Like the amount of difference between you and a cow, you have all the same parts of your brain. Like you have the same kind of brain structure. You have
okay,
different sizes,
they're
different
all
lobes,
under the
but they're
line.
very similar.
They're all under
Like
the line, but cows are closer to the line than like a crawfish. I'll
you
agree
can say
with
they're
that.
closer to the line, but if we're saying that there's any amount, and you don't hold this position, but if you're granting there's any amount of weighing that we give those cows, the amount of suffering they're going through is pretty fucking huge. Even if you wanted to like take the actual amount of suffering and say, well, it only counts for like 1/10 as much, it would still be the case that even though you have this magic reason of cows count for 1/10 as much, and it's not because of any like actual amount of suffering they're experiencing, then you still have this like wildly outlandish claim on your hands, which is just that why would even 10 months be that, or sorry, why would even 1 month be worth it? And you're saying, well, no, it's about a couple seconds would be worth it. But it's
Yeah.
not like the scale there is like the cow is like it's 2 seconds to every fucking 10 months that you experience.
Okay, well, let me ask you. I'm going to give you the classic abortion one then. Okay, let's say
Yeah.
in front of you there's a child that's like laying in a burning building, and then on the other hand, you have 100 cows, right? Because you were saying 1/10, you were kind of like inducting that, right? Let's say it's 100 cows. Are you saving the child? Like, you only got time to save once.
Are
One,
we
are you saving the
controlling
child,
for?
or are you saving the 100 cows?
If we don't control out for all the externalities that I think exist in the real world, then I would save the child. But if we do control out for all of those, then I would save the cows.
Like, what externalities?
Like the fact that that human being can then do more good for others. If we're imagining they're just doing good for themselves, like they're just having their own good life, they never do anything positive for anyone else, then I would save the cows. Like
Yeah, but in the real world, like, I do much more good for others having access
Yes.
to meat than the cow is
No.
ever gonna. Like, the only good that the cow does for others, unfortunately, is the fact that it provides me its body for
You're
me
saying
to
that
consume.
because of the
What
because
does
of
it do
the
to benefits anybody? Name me one thing a cow does that benefits
I don't
anybody
just
other than
care
itself.
about the I don't just care about the benefits the cow has towards other people. I also care about the impact the cow has on itself. What I'm telling you is, if you want to say that like there's this utility concern of like, okay, well, when I have meat, I get happier. When I'm happier, I'm more efficient at working, and thus I can do more good for other people because I
My
can do a
pleasure, yeah.
better job. That's once again an empirical dispute, which I'm just going to disagree with you on. I don't think it's the case that you do so much better at your job that it outweighs the tremendous amount of suffering the cow has to go through to make that same amount of meat. If you
It's not
want to say it did,
empirical. I
it
guess
would be empirical.
it might be under the definite, like under a strict definition, empirical, but there's no way you can like objectively measure, like in suffering units, the cow versus me.
Well, you can definitely induct. So you can't you can't take a big like suffering ruler and stick it to the cow head and see how much suffering it's feeling or something. But you can
Right.
induct from things like, well, here's the kind of brain the cow has, here's the kind of brain I have. Because of the fact that with this kind of brain I have this kind of experiences, this thing with a really similar brain probably has pretty similar experiences. I know that it's got like this many neurons in comparison to my this many neurons. So I can start inducting about like, okay, well, it seems like the neurons are responsible for the experiences, or at least some subsection of neurons are. So I should induct from the fact that it has less neurons, it's probably going to have less of an experience than I am. And so you can start doing all of this like mental math to figure out, okay, the cow probably has less than a human does. That's probably fair. But it doesn't have 2 seconds to every 10 months. That's just a leap, right? It doesn't have 2 to every how many fucking seconds is in 10 months?
I don't think it's
Lot.
linear, because like there's certain categories of understanding that I think are uniquely different when it comes to like suffering. So for example, like even if a cow, you count up the neurons, and let's say like they have half the neurons of a human, which I'm not even sure you can really derive intelligence from the number of neurons necessarily. Like there's a lot of.
I just think it's a correlate. I don't think it's not
it's
about having absolute.
yeah, it could be a correlate,
And
but
that's
then we
all
also
we have are correlates.
well, it's a correlate potentially, okay, but like you also run into like a whole bunch of issues, which is like cows don't have like a full understanding of like I don't know, self-identity, and like they have the level of consciousness of to really like suffer in the way a human can, right? So a cow appears to be like short of the neurons to like understand the concept of death and like what happens after death. They have
There's
no understanding of this.
No. There's plenty of good evidence to show that cows do have an understanding of death. They grieve when their loved ones die, for example. They'll cry over their corpses. Same is true for pigs. Same is true for chickens, even, right?
They don't understand the
And
concept
cows
of
do
death,
have
though.
and the part of the brain that I don't know what you mean by the concept of death, but the cows
Yeah,
do have the
like
part of the brain
imagining
responsible for
themselves being
understanding.
dead.
They can definitely do that, because they can be scared of dying. If you can be scared of dying, you can imagine dying.
I don't think that's like a higher order level fear. I think that's like a.
It doesn't have to be some super high level.
It's an adrenaline reaction of like fear of threat, right?
Then they have to be able to imagine that there's a threat. You can't
Well,
have
I
a
mean, they
fear
don't
of something.
imagine
No, they
pain.
feel there's a threat.
Yeah.
Look,
How
when
do
I'm
they
like
feel?
trying to crush like a bug, it's running all over the fucking wall because it's like fucking threat, right?
I agree. I think
I don't think the bug has like I don't think the bug is like a conception of, well, if I get smushed, then like my thought process, my train of thought, everything like ends, and like XYZ is going to happen. Like they're not capable of the same kind of understanding of like consequences.
What
as
kind of
people
evidence do we
are.
have for the cow that we wouldn't also have for like a person with severe mental disabilities?
Well, I think under your system, you have to be like put someone with like severe mental illness at the same level of a cow, don't you?
I do. That's why I think
I
it's
know
wrong
you
to eat
do.
the
I would,
boat.
I would predict you would.
I think it's wrong
So
to
that
eat
shows
both of
how
them.
much I understand your fucking
What I'm
position,
asking,
right?
no, what I'm asking you, because I think that you should as well, unless you're just drawing an arbitrary line around some random species somewhere. And that's going to have issues.
I am doing that.
So
I'm working
the
within your
issue
system, but humans are a separate category.
Just a second. I'm not even sure you are, because it seems like you don't even have a line to draw. If I asked you what a human is, you'd have to put the word human in the definition. So it doesn't even
Homo
seem like you have
sapiens
a line.
sapiens, right?
Just that species?
Yeah.
So if somebody was a mutant, in every other way they're the exact same as you, but they're just technically not a human because they're a different species.
Yes.
Can I rape that person?
Yeah, it's not a person.
Okay, imagine a mutant. Like imagine you go to your next door neighbor's house, you test his genes. Turns out he's technically not a human. Never knew it. He's been living his entire life just thinking he was one. Is it okay for you to rape your neighbor, though?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, his kids are also going to have the genes that he does. So his wife
I
and him both
can't
have
talk
this
about it.
gene.
No.
Can you
We're on
rape his-
Twitch. We're on Twitch.
Can
We're
you-
on Twitch. We're
look,
on Twitch. Then
Then we could be on Twitch. We could be on Twitch.
no,
Fine.
we cannot. We cannot talk about this on Twitch. That's not true.
Look, we could be on Twitch. So don't worry. I'm not gonna say anything that's TOS or anything, right? But
Can
just
you
like
hug their
there's
children?
an obvious
Stop. No, I'm not answering this question.
There's
I
an
refuse.
obvious reductio involving, instead of it being adult mutants, there are other ages of mutants. And Lactoid is a libertarian, and thus there's only one conclusion. Okay.
Look, if we weren't look, you'll yell at Twitch, say I would engage, but I can't. Sorry.
This reminds me of what the Nazis do when they're like, "Oh, I can't talk about that historical event. I just can't talk about it. I'm sorry." It's TOS,
This is an argument against censorship. Yeah.
I agree. Look, this is actually my favorite argument against censorship. Like, holy shit, it makes it so much harder to have conversations with people who have like extreme or out there views.
I just want to like pose my question to Prime. So like yeah, based off of like how I understand sort of how you fleshed out your worldview of like if you were able to Thanos snap and make the conditions of animals better, you would do that. As in that is an improvement for you.
I would give them orgasms when they die, right?
Because in your framework, is that moral progress for you?
Giving animals orgasms
Or whatever, like yeah, giving them all hotel rooms, and room service, all that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, okay, good. So we almost have like a sort of to bring up lactoids, almost a full spectrum. Lactoid, the sociopathic and animals have no rights.
This panel is certainly a full spectrum. Certainly on the spectrum.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take it. And then Prime, it's like, yeah, he would improve the conditions of animals. And then me, technically vegetarian, although like, yeah, I can also concede that synth is more moral than me. So I would pose to you, Prime. So let's say, and I've posed this before, but I'm curious on your answer. In, let's say, 15, 20 years, 25 years, you have fully synthetic meat grown in a lab that is pretty much 100% replica to, ground beef.
Any other type of meat. Hmm?
Yeah. And it's side by side in the supermarket. So which one would you choose? And would you, and as the person who goes out of their way to buy the animal-derived meat, when the price is the same, the cost is the same, like, do you view that person as like morally equal to everyone else who's choosing the synthetic meat? Basically, like, yeah, where if everything's controlled for, and we have in the supermarket side by side synthetic lab-grown meat that is identical in every way to animal-derived meat. Is a person who's what if you come across that person who says it actually makes me feel better knowing that an animal has been killed? So lactoid pie.
Lactoid,
yeah, exactly.
Lactoid to me.
I get a psychological boost knowing that this animal's been shot somehow.
I don't care how the animal died.
Yeah, exactly. So to bolster my point, the purely sociopathic on one end of the spectrum, the full spectrum here. So yeah, I'm curious. I'm curious how you'd answer, Prime.
Quickly. I would like if it's equal in all ways. Then I would choose the synthetic meat. I would definitely choose that. Would I look at lactoid specifically as less moral? I think it's fine. Yeah, I would think it's the less moral choice. Well. Yeah, I think that like these things change like moral. I'm not sure the term I want to use here. Moral outlooks or moral calculations maybe change with access to resources. You know that if I don't need to run this whole down. You know what I mean by that. So anyway, if we have better resources and it's an alternative, I'm going to take that alternative. And the other person who is like, that's putting unnecessary, in my mind, unnecessary suffering in the world by using real animals, then they are less moral. Not like amoral, simply less moral.
Okay. And I'm curious, does this extend to other consumer products? Let's say someone who drives, I don't know, some ridiculous car, I don't know, or whatever, Humvees or Hummers or Humvees.
Yeah.
Like, So do you see that as any moral judgment there of like let's say the supplies used to make the Hummer or Humvee, it's like, yeah, let's say there's child labor involved, and let's say there's
Sure.
exploitation of minerals.
It's
But
powered by
is
human
that
suffering.
yeah, exactly. So if you know that person, it's like if they go out of their way saying I get a boost knowing that there's some sort of exploitation occurring in making this Hummer or Humvee. Is that also amoral to you, or there's now
Well,
moral judgment there?
it's I mean, so I get, again, it's a matter of resources. Now, if there is no alternative, right? Like if our vehicles are powered by like purely human suffering, right? Like concentrated liquid human suffering.
Ground
And
human into the
or
into the tank.
or ground human. All right, sure, whatever you like. Um, then it's of a, I guess, a matter of utility at some point where like is the work that we're doing so impactful that uh it cancels us out. But which I would doubt if it was just like pure human suffering. Um, but like we live under capitalism, and so like most of the products we have like come from a level of human suffering, right? But like uh
Sure.
we can be, because I don't have an alternative, because lactate won't let me, and because uh, uh, and because the level of suffering is at a low enough ambient level, I can excuse it.
Sure, fair enough.
I would also eat the synthetic meat, by the way,
At the
because
end of
of
the day,
the health. Apparently, right? Like, there's no risk of like pathogens or what's the fucking term?
Like the vaccination or like
Antibiotics?
the antibiotics, yeah.
No. Well, that's a good reason too. It's a really good reason, actually. The environmental impact as well,
huge
and
contributor
then
to antibiotic resistance is animal agriculture.
yeah,
Yeah.
mad cow disease, shit like that, like prions. This is the word I was looking for. I think it's like, so yeah, there's a whole bunch of reasons, and on top of that, like the social pressure as well. Like, I think if you got synthetic meat to be indistinguishable, and uh, and then like we were putting that out,
Yeah,
like it'd be
I
kind
think
of
most people would morally judge because it
people
is.
would be more angry with me if I was like, no, I want the actual pig. And it'd probably be like some pushback initially. I could get away with it for a while, but you know,
Mhm.
But
Um,
there's going to be some conservatives out there saying, "I just want my meat the old-fashioned way."
yeah. And there's a reason probably to distrust it, right? Like synthetic meat, like that's probably scary. Like, I don't know, I wouldn't trust the first batch.
Well, I also wouldn't trust that. Like, presumably, there have been multiple batches and testing before it becomes an actual widespread consumer product. But I would trust the first one
Presumably,
that
if we have a
presumably, yeah.
government that we invest in that regulates things, then yeah, I would agree. That's the thing that would happen. Leave it up to the markets. Who knows? But anyway,
Yeah, because the FDA, sure, because regulatory capture is not a real thing.
hey, who would actually expunge all that? I would, obviously, right?
Expu-
My politics demands it. That we work to expunge that level of corruption. Like I talk about it all the time. All right, anyway, it's fine. Let's move on to our next topic.
Speaking
We
of
want
FDA,
so yeah, exactly. Um, but to all, if you've been enjoying this conversation, shout out to you. Thanks for being here. Hit the follow button in case you haven't done so yet. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We'd love to have you. And consider supporting the channel by buying a sub. Be our first sub gifter. Our first super chat was from our friend Sean earlier of the year. But consider subbing to the channel if you're out there, you haven't done so yet. Support this community so we can keep giving you this content. Need your help to do that. It can't disappears without you. So, or gifting subs or gifting bits, all that good stuff. We would love to have you be the first of the year to support this community so I can keep doing this. Okay. Topic 2. Med spas are an unregulated but growing industry. They cater to those in the quote unquote wellness movement that has swept the country. These spas provide cosmetic procedures such as intravenous fat dissolving injections, uh, uh, fat dissolving treatments, excuse me. However, the products injected are unapproved and untested, and the staff performing injections are sometimes untrained. This has resulted in horrible infections which have caused scarring and even deaths. Is this an example of why the medical field needs government oversight? Should national standards be imposed, despite the industry making attempts to self organize? Should, since there is a dearth of information available to consumers, do we need rules around reporting so patients can make informed decisions? And is the patients as consumers ideology partly to blame? So yeah, I'm sure you guys have heard of the concept of a med spa, right? Like it's just like a place where you get mostly cosmetic uh procedures done, but not like plastic surgery. My understanding, I think like it is like it falls in between, right? Like of like
I think you get some sculpting done or whatever.
yeah, like it's like in between like a yoga retreat and like plastic surgery, like in that scale, it's somewhere there, right? Um, but yeah, you get all kinds of stuff like Botox, right? Like you'll like people get like Botox or something there. Um, but it's it's kind of the Wild West there. It's like a legal gray area, and the article that I was looking at showed examples where it's gone horribly wrong. And so I'm wondering like what does this mean in terms of regulation, and what should this mean in terms of the patient as consumers ideology, which is something I really want to examine, um because that's like a way that we have come to internalize um our experiences with healthcare, and is that optimal? All right, so we'll start for Van Lactode, work our way around.
Yeah. So in the beginning of this, we talked a little bit, kind of the initial shoot the shit. I brought up an example, a doctor named Dr. Edward Group. Now he's a doctor. He's a chiropractor, Corey. I know how much you love those guys. He's a DC, features that prominently
Doctor.
after his name, along with the I think doctorate of naturopathy. I think is what it's called.
ND.
ND. Yeah, it was DCND. So somebody that Corey Campbell deeply respects in the medical field. And he, I spent a few hours just like going through all of his stuff. He has a tour of his facility. They talk a lot about vibrations, or that's a big one for them. They, have the vibrations of rosemary down. By the way, I think it's
Good
340
vibration.
hertz. Yeah, like rosemary, for example, vibrates at 340 hertz. So they store things in containers with rosemary next to it, so that other things can absorb the vibrations and love as well. That was a critical
Like
component.
shock absorbers. uh
Like the essence. I think they made
okay.
rosemary essence of rosemary. That's what they talked about. And so he sells a lot of courses because, of course, why not? And one of the courses was for $1,500. Now, if I had acted fast, I could have got it for I think $500 off. So I mean, that's not some people probably got it cheaper, but it was urine therapy, urinotherapy or whatever. And it was, it doesn't say it on the actual course website because you don't want to give away the secrets. But you look into it, and there's some other people who have talked with Dr. Group about this procedure, and it's all about the magics of drinking your own urine, how that's good for you. But then also one guy who was on the show with him and then pulled out a fucking syringe full of his own urine, and he's just like straight up like injects his arm with his own urine. Now, so let's take this guy for example. Would I want this guy? Would I go to a med spa run by Urine Man injecting himself with his own urine? No, I wouldn't. Would I ban Urine Man? Absolutely not. Okay. Some people, you know, want to inject their arms with their own fucking urine for some reason. Okay. Uh, do I think that people deserve to know what they're getting themselves into? I do. So My only regulation I have for all these med spas and urine injectors and anybody else would be you have to tell people, hey, um, just so you know, we have no evidence this actually works, but we just kind of think it does. Um, and oh, by the way, our needles can be like, we don't really clean our needles all that well, right? Sign here. And if they sign, then there you go. How should the disputes be resolved? Lawsuits, right? You can allege, well, hey, you didn't inform me that you didn't clean your needles. And then, if it turns out that you didn't clean your needles, then the other person gets money. That's how all issues should be resolved here.
Okay, Corey, please.
Okay. Well, I'll pretty much be the opposite side of the coin. Ban naturopaths, ban chiropractors, ban osteopaths. Okay, that means goodbye, Dr. Mike. Osteopaths, those are just second-rate MDs. I don't really care about the equivalent training. Osteopaths are not real medical doctors. These are just pretty much actual med school dropouts. And like osteopath is just straight pseudoscience, along with chiropractic and naturopathic doctors. And yes, totally patient as consumers ideology, I think, is partly to blame. Maybe not fully to blame, but absolutely, I think it's a factor. And there's a whole, like, this is a topic that I'm certainly passionate about, along with the first topic. I think these are fantastic topics as usual. Where it's like, yeah, even with in Lactoid's world, even with like perfect transparency, which I don't think at the end of the day this will ever be enforced. This is, I don't think the free market is where, let's say, medical resources should be delivered, and I'll leave it there for now.
Okay, next is our friend Synth.
So I'm almost amicable to Lactoid's position, right? Like the kind of solution that I want is something in which we have some kind of restrictions on things like false advertising, and you have some kind of like externality tax when something goes wrong. I don't think if you inform somebody of like, oh yeah, sometimes we don't clean our needles, I don't think that's gonna be sufficient. I think you have to have both of those things there, and it has to be the case that even if you did inform somebody, you still have to pay an externality tax if you fuck something up, and get somebody sick. The One of the issues though is that even if you ban things like false advertising, there's still like a million other routes that you have to deal with, you have to contend with, that are really difficult to all put a cap on. Like I'm not sure how do you what kind of like approach could you possibly have to having a ban on false advertising if it's advertising coming through word of mouth? If it's just people saying like, oh yeah, look, the government forces them because of the fact that like atheists run the government or something, or like the World Economic Forum forces people who have these like spiritual ideas to tell you this, and it's totally bullshit. And then you go in and they tell you it, you're just not going to believe it. You're going to be like, oh yeah, you're forced to do that by the government. There's a lot of individuals who are going to be wildly skeptical of a government mandate like this, and if you say something like, they have to tell people that they have no evidence to support their views on medicine, and they have to inform people they don't clean their needles, or that their needles are like some that can cause diseases. They're just going to be skeptical of hearing that once they hear that they're forced to by government mandate. They're not going to think it's genuine. They're not going to think, oh, the person actually believes this. They're just going to work around it. And there's a million other avenues for lobbying that are impossible to put a cap on. That end up being things like, well, you can just advertise directly to people, you can advertise directly to politicians. Then when you have larger companies who aren't like these small scale spas, but are larger scale homeopathic companies, it makes it pretty easy for in companies like that, for institutions like that, to go about a practice in which they inform people the opposite direction. Then when it comes time to agree to agree to sign a paper or something, the paper doesn't count for shit to them. They're just like, oh, well, yeah, you have to do this. It's by force. So I think the only real approach here just ends up being strict regulations in companies like this, because there's no way you're going to be able to inform people to stop harming themselves, or to have the correct kind of epistemic views, or to figure out truth the correct kind of way. That's wildly difficult. It's a good social effort, and there's like points to doing that, but it's not going to stop people from going in and like injecting piss into their veins. That's it.
So, thank you. So I guess I'll give my opinion. Multiple things here. One, another person wants to join us, so hopefully they'll be here soon. And they have from what they've described to me, a useful perspective on this. Hopefully, they'll be here. But I think what Synth said was actually really interesting. About like if the regulation is simply that uh we have to read this script saying this product is untested, right? Well, then like they can do that, but then afterwards they can say anything else, right? Like this reminds me of I think it was like Virginia or something, one of those states, where they had some abortion regulation, where they had to say that abortion was like unsafe, like the state legislature like demand that they say that. So like they read this script, right? Like before they read it, they're like, I'm gonna preface this. Hey, I don't believe what I'm gonna say. This is a government thing I have to do,
I'm just
right?
forced to read this.
I'm
Yeah.
just
So
forced
just
to
ignore
read
it.
this. And then they read it, and then afterwards they're like, okay, all that's bullshit. And like this is why it's safe. These are the evidence or whatever, right? Any questions you'd like to ask me, I can answer them. So I hadn't considered that. I hadn't considered that. That's really interesting. So it seems to me that you would have to have more stringent regulation that like the products have to be safe that you're injecting into people. If the point is to protect them, but then again, I guess Lactoid, your point isn't to protect them; it's simply to inform them. So yeah, well, let's jump at it.
Yeah,
Uh,
I think to inform them is you're 100% right. So I would think of this like comparable to cigarette smoking, for example, where it's like, yeah, you can tell people, hey, it causes cancer, and for whatever reason, people are still going to choose to engage in the activity because it's pleasurable. Perhaps they like the way it affects them, et cetera, et cetera. Um, I just don't think that. I think you could apply that. In fact, I would probably argue. I don't have the evidence for this, so I guess it's possible. My hypothesis would be that injecting urine in your muscle is bad. And my hypothesis would be that there's on at least like an aggregate level, it's significantly less bad than tobacco overall. Yet we would allow tobacco consumption, but for some reason we wouldn't allow for this kind of consumption. I think that there's a duty to warn like an adult, but ultimately this is I think a bodily autonomy question where you're an adult with your own body. If you want to inject pee or have someone inject pee into your like your fucking body, that's up to you. And the idea that we can just say, no, you're not, like, you don't get to decide what goes in your body. We're the government. Fuck you. Um, this is a particularly like invasive regulation.
Yeah, so I don't think there's any issue with like an invasion of bodily autonomy in question here. I think that it's clear that you can say something like there are thresholds of harm where I'm saying like below this threshold of harm, it's like do whatever the fuck you want, but above it, don't do that. And in the case of smoking, I think that both me and Corey, and it seems like most people in society, are fine with saying something like, yeah, we should have a slow march towards a total getting rid of the tobacco industry. It's fine for us. Like at least for me, like speaking for myself, yeah, I think it's a good thing to do that. We ought to have increasingly strict regulations of tobacco that eventually make it less and less desirable. You can't just rip everyone off of it because what ends up happening is you just have a bunch of people going into withdrawals and they get their tobacco from black market instead. But if you could press a button that would make tobacco not exist anymore, I don't think there'd be any moral issue with doing that. I don't think it's the case that you violated somebody's bodily autonomy by not allowing there to be consumption of some particular product that you've banned the production of. It doesn't seem like there's a violation of bodily autonomy
And
there.
I think that
and,
absolutely is.
and hold on, let me say one more thing. And so Lactoid then Corey. Um, is that like I think there's a difference between scale and corporate in government or societal acceptance maybe. So what I mean is that like if like we're there's a difference between like a person growing tobacco in their backyard, right? If that's the thing you can do. I'm not sure how easy it is to grow tobacco, but like if you could grow tobacco in your backyard and use it for your own purposes, well, I have nothing to say about that. And if you wanted to get it through like a small grower, I would say that. And then the other thing, when I was saying like societal like acceptance, is that like when we have these giant organizations that have an air of legitimacy, that changes the public's relation to it, right? Like it changes the relation to the public where a corporation puts out cigarettes or any other product, right? Like if a corporation puts out the lipo be gone liquids that people are injecting in, then people have a tendency to think, well, this must be safe. There's something about this. rather than if it's the exact same product, but you know it's cooked up in this person's like fucking bathtub, right? Like that changes your relationship to the product. So if we are saying that, no, if a person were to say that we're banning these med spas, right? It's that doesn't mean that you couldn't also do the same thing like in your kitchen, right? You could inject these chemicals in your or someone else's kitchen, but maybe not have this illegitimacy that people think that a med spa means medically licensed, right? You know, so yeah, so,
Lax, we can
lactoiting.
actually. Can I
Okay.
ask you a question about the bodily autonomy thing? I want to know is like, do you? I don't remember what your view is on this. Do you think it's a violation of people's bodily autonomy to ban the production of nukes? Like private companies can't produce nuclear weapons.
So when it comes to nuclear, it is a violation. But then the question is like the risk of harm, like the risk of violation of consent from an armed nuclear weapon is sufficiently high. I think that like on balance, the calculus comes out to not allowing people to do it. But when it comes to something like injecting yourself with your own urine, you're not actually, it's all about yourself. You're not necessarily posing that risk to other innocent people who want nothing to do with it. And so like in situations like that, I'm there's a I don't see like a I don't see why disallowing it like I don't see why it increases consent to disallow it for anybody. So
Well, when
if
you.
we or with drugs, by the way, like
Hmm.
all drugs should be legalized under the exact same theory. And to I think Prime's point, if we didn't like regulate things, had this kind of paternalistic government where we regulated things for people's own safety, then then I think people would not have this expectation that well it's allowed therefore it must be safe. No, like it should be like okay, just so you know, like alcohol is not safe. We allow the sale of it, but it's not safe, and you definitely like got to be careful with it. Same thing with tobacco. So we put warnings all over the place about tobacco. We have campaigns educating people about tobacco. So we can do the same thing about injecting yourself with urine. But ultimately, like a level of infringement on
Warning
like
label on
you're gonna come
urine.
into my
Sorry.
house
I'm just
and tell me
picture like
that
a
I can't
syringe filled
inject
with
myself
urine,
with
like
my own urine?
Xed out.
Like
Do not
Jesus
inject
Christ.
the yellow syringe.
Look, I mean,
Yeah.
even if you want to say there, it seems like now your answer was just like, yeah, there are just thresholds of harm. But to be super clear, it's not the case that when you get sick, you're just a harm to yourself. Like there's also a chance of you getting other people sick. If somebody says like, I want to own a nuclear bomb or I want enriched uranium just because I want to eat it or something, is that's like you can slowly over the course of a year try your best to chew at a nuclear bomb if you
Yeah.
want. That's not a it's not like a you can say it is a violation of bodily autonomy or something, but it's not like a higher violation of bodily autonomy to say something like, yeah, we're going to dispermit you from producing a certain kind of thing, and say it's a lower
No,
violation of bodily autonomy to say something like compelled speech is something we're gonna have. If we
so
say you have to say this phrase before you administer this medicine, that seems like a larger violation of bodily autonomy than just you can't produce the medicine.
no, it's not because again, part of a consensual. My goal here is to maximize consent, right? And so consumer that only not only means for the producer, but that also means for the consumer. So the consumer, in order to consent to something, there needs to be some level of information, and the more information that somebody has about something, the more valuable that consent is, right?
Well, look,
So if you
if
real
somebody
quick, so
unknowingly, yeah, you go
if you
first, yeah.
value yeah, if you value informed consent like I do, then you know, and also to avoid fraud, right? Then I think it is important that people understand what they're buying. Right, a contract requires a level of prerequisite knowledge amongst both parties. Part of the reason why we don't allow children to get involved in contracts. I also would not allow children to get involved in this therapy. But you're right in that there are practices that could like pose like a pathological risk that could be sufficiently high where I would disallow them, right? In the same way, like the nukes, right? Yes, the risk is too high for the nuclear weapon. The risk would also be too high if I found some guy manufacturing smallpox in his basement, right? Like no, like the risk here is just too high. Smallpox is incredibly virulent. It's incredibly deadly. I
Look,
have yet to see sufficient.
if your thresholds are just based on maximizing consent, then it's pretty easy to see why a small violation of somebody's consent by stopping them from being able to inject pee into themselves has a positive effect on overall consent because now they're not dead, right? If you're dead, you can't consent to anything. So if you want to maximize consent, making sure people don't die is really important. That
No, but you can consent to dying.
you
Like
can,
simply
but if
like
you're
dying or
but they
risk
aren't
of
doing
dying
that.
is like an outcome of any. Well, no, you are
They don't
engaging in
know
a risk of dying.
they're
That's
engaging
going to
in
be on the
risk, but it's
fucking
not someone's
government.
consent.
Yeah, on the government thing. You have a risk of dying if you inject pee
You have
in
a risk
yourself.
of being sexually assaulted if you walk without a dark alleyway. It doesn't mean you've consented to it.
No, so the difference here, hold on real quick. The difference here is that when you consent to like, okay, here you're going to engage in this particular activity where you inject yourself with like this chemical, and this chemical has XYZ risks. This is different in proximity and also actors, as opposed to if you're walking down an alleyway where you have another actor intervening and doing something wrong and violating your consent. Now, this does get a little bit fucking dicey because when you put yourself in dangerous conditions, there can be a level of culpability. If you're walking down the street and you're not watching where you're going and you fall into a hole, you do have a duty to watch where you're going, right? So
of course, but culpability is not the same as consent either,
yes,
right?
You do. Hold on. There is a level of culpability on somebody who goes down a dark alleyway and gets assaulted. There is a level of culpability. It's dramatically less. Dramatically less than the level of culpability of the person who assaulted them.
Well, we're not talking about culpability. We're talking about a totally different concept, which is consent. You can be culpable of something, but not consent to it. And you agree with this because that person didn't consent to being raped in a dark alley. Even if it's the case you're running butt naked down a dark alley, doesn't mean you consent. You're just more culpable. And culpability is not what you're trying to maximize. You're trying to maximize consent. And if you're dead, you can't consent to anything. So even if you say something like, yes, well, they took a risk of dying, they didn't consent to it because those if you ask the individuals taking this medicine, hey, what do you think is more risky? You taking this medicine that you think, for some reason, you think like the homeopathic shit works. What do you think is more risky? You taking that or you walking down a dark alleyway butt-ass naked? Well, you're going to say, obviously, the one more risky.
There's an intervening.
We confuse culpability and consent all the time. I think it's a good point. Just put it out there. We confuse culpability and consent all the time. So it's really good to draw that line. Go ahead. You can actually I do want to get Corey the chance though.
Well, no, I think culpability requires that, like, to some extent, that you've consented to what you've done, right? If you don't consent to being like
to what you
something you've done or you haven't done, right? Like, do you consent to like drunk driving? Well, if you didn't consent to drunk driving, then I wouldn't hold you culpable. These two things like are related. Now, if you're walking down an alleyway, this is one of the most difficult situations. I don't disagree. If you intentionally choose to put yourself in a situation where, let's say, you even knew that like you were going to be assaulted, right? The difference here is when you have like an intervening like actor of consent, like in between your action and then the end case action where they are responsible for violating your consent because all you've consented to doing is walking down this alleyway, right? And if you're walking down on, like, let's say the alleyway is covered with ice and you slip and fall, I think you did consent to slip and fall to some extent, right? You consented to the risk of slipping and falling.
But that's not consent.
But you didn't. But when you're walking down and there's another actor, right? Like there's a break. Mm-hmm. There's a break in culpability. There's a break in consent where it's not like the natural result of your action. It's not the natural result of your action because another actor's action is not natural.
Look, even if it's the case that it's some other actor wasn't involved, we would still say a person didn't consent. There's a risk that when you drive, that you'll get hit into, you'll get crashed into with a car. And if you could ask the same people the same scenario here, right? Imagine this is the case, like just totally negligently, or not even negligently. Right? Imagine there's no other actor involved. Just the roads are fucking slick. Did you consent to slamming into a tree and killing yourself? You didn't do that.
Yes, you did. You consented to a risk of dying. You consented. Right. Consenting is a affirmative, informed decision that you make.
Okay, informed. They don't. They wouldn't have that.
No. There's a level of informedness when it comes to driving, right? Everybody consents to a risk of dying when you get on the road. Now, there are things that raise that risk that you might not consent to, like drunk driving. This is why we don't allow drunk driving, right? So when people do enter the road, because it's illegal to drunk drive, they have like a reasonable expectation of the risk that they've consented to. Does not include drunk drivers. That's why we punish drunk drivers. But there is a risk of dying even with sober drivers. And if you kill somebody in a car wreck, that doesn't actually mean necessarily that you're culpable, and it doesn't actually mean
we're not talking about lactoid.
Sorry, we have
the same loop, right?
We have to move forward. That being
said, we got a line of one person here.
Yeah.
We are looping lactoid. The idea is like there's a huge difference between consent and culpability, and the culpability of the other actor is irrelevant to whether or not you've consented. Right, so
I think you have to consent to something in order to be culpable.
So hold on. Okay.
Well, yeah,
okay.
but you don't. That's
wait a second. So I want to go to Corey, but like this actually does dovetail exactly something I want to ask. So I'm going to ask a quick question, Corey. I apologize.
Yeah, okay.
But like, lactoid. Would it be fine, or would you allow people to inject a drug that turned them into zombies?
Probably not. No, because then the action, like, and then the question is like methamphetamines or like bath salts, right?
Yeah, so what if they were like really ineffective zombies? Where they can cause a problem, but like probably like not like they're like extremely slow zombies, or their ability to kill or infect anyone else is really small, like with that. But like a person who drive pleasure for whatever reason for like injecting this, like
There's a
ultimate pleasure.
guarantee they'll turn him into a zombie or like some chance?
Let's say for simplicity's sake,
Because you're just
it's
describing marijuana now at this point.
it guarantees that they're gonna turn into fuck. All right, okay, all right. I guess you give
Well,
me
it's
my
so
answer.
the answer is going to be like whenever you're doing anything that poses a risk to everybody else around you, like there absolutely is like a nuisance value here of like the people around you didn't consent to you doing this activity, and it affects their lives, and then we have to come and stop you from doing this activity, and that affects your life, and so there's going to be a balancing that we do in every situation. So when it comes to regulation. So if what you're doing poses a lot of risk to yourself, but not really any risk to anybody else, I'm always going to be in favor of allowing that because my goal is to maximize consent here. You consented to doing the activity. I don't want to violate your will about something that it's the violation is not nearly as wrong as all the minor violation that you're doing to everyone else around you by doing it. But if it's something like owning a nuke or manufacturing smallpox or zombie virus or whatever, right? The risk to everyone else is so high and they don't consent to that. That violation is sufficiently high enough where I am going to start like getting involved and stopping you. It's the same way, like, yeah, if you punch somebody, I'm going to stop you. But if you like come up behind somebody at the bar and like, pat them on the shoulder, right? They never told you not to or whatever. I'm not going to just throw you in a fucking cage, even though you touched them without necessarily asking them first. But if you grab their breast, I might, right? There's different levels to this shit. And it's going to be a calculation every single time.
Okay, let's go to our friend Corey, and later on to our friend Ali.
Yeah, a couple things to engage with Lactoid on. So, and also just one thing also to bring up that was brought up earlier with like this aspect of like legitimacy, and like this potential aura of legitimacy from these med spas. And like legitimacy is like a really difficult thing, and many people, understandably, but unfortunately, do fall prey to it. And like for what it's worth, this is coming from maybe an idiot like myself, but I consider Lactoid an intelligent person in my books, a really intelligent person in my books for what it's worth. And I would say even he himself, I'd say fell prey to, let's say, the perceived legitimacy of, like, I think on a previous
Dr.
panel.
Mike.
Yeah, exactly. You didn't know at the time that he was an
We're three.
osteopath.
Oh, no, he was
Exactly.
a chiro. I thought he was a chiropractor.
No,
Was
he's
he
an
a-
osteo. He's an osteopath.
Okay. All right.
Exactly.
What is an osteopath?
I'll
Quickly?
think twice
I
before questioning you again, Corey.
Because, and understandably, I don't blame you at all. Where this, so an osteopath, to answer your question, is basically, so in the past, similar to chiropractic, it's essentially like all pseudoscience based off basic manipulation, and a whole bunch of basically BS. And like over time, it has evolved where like, yeah, like the medical training that they receive is technically, it's perceived as equivalent to an MD, but then just pegs the question of like, well, why do osteopaths exist to begin with?
He
Generally
wears a lab
speaking,
coat.
yeah, and he boxes, and he's a very handsome man, so that counts for something. But like, yeah, so as of now, currently, okay, at least I think legally speaking, but maybe Lacroix can correct me if I'm wrong, but yes, MDs are seen as equivalent. They can prescribe, but they also receive this additional training in terms of like basically pseudoscientific practices of manipulation, et cetera, et cetera. But historically speaking, okay, as in like it is essentially pseudoscience, like plain and simple. Just so happens that they've had to evolve because like they were being called out for the pseudoscience. And they're generally their acceptance rates, or rather, their admission requirements are lower for medical school, and I would say they're just generally second-rate MDs.
Understood.
Personally. But yes, Lactoid fell prey, understandably, to that air of legitimacy because, yes, he has well-produced videos. He markets himself as Dr. Mike, just as I'm sure the Alex Jones person markets himself as a doctor. but a doctor of chiropractic is, not a medical doctor and like should not be a credential at all. It's actually a shame that anybody can get that credential and call themselves doctor. Um, but yeah, just commenting on that. But to ask you the question, Lactoid. So you brought up in your opening statement about like, as long as it's transparent, if something goes wrong, you can sue. And I'm curious, let's say in the article that was provided, where there was this person that they received TPN, which is like pretty wild because I actually have received TPN. That's basically just being fed through your veins, and typically that is given through a central line, which is like which is an IV that goes directly to your heart. And they just gave that through a traditional IV, and that typically burns. But regardless, so that person died, and I'm curious, based off of some past conversations, you mentioned that there should, in your opinion, there should be some sort of cap on how much you can sue for. So I'm curious, like for that family, like how much money do you think that life is worth in that scenario?
Some amount. I mean, ultimate. I don't know what the cap would be in this specific scenario. But yeah, I would put some cap for sure.
Like, do you think like a few $100,000 is enough to ease the suffering of that family?
Potentially. Yeah. It depends on the family. It depends on the person, right?
If you were to,
Like this is the difficult thing that like when it comes to determining damages that no one likes to think about, which is that like if your death doesn't have a major effect on anybody, you're like legally speaking, your death is less valuable. It just is, and like you're going to get less. Like whoever's suing on the estate, if whoever's suing on the behalf of your estate is going to get less money. In fact, and this actually leads to like a significant practice is if you're defending against one of these wrongful death suits, is to try to make the argument that their family is actually not as close as they say. Right? Some people will say, "Oh, he was so dear to my heart," and then you find out they haven't spoken in 10 years. Right? That's of course it's going to be a point that you bring up. I was in one case that I was involved with. There was a guy who one of the witnesses was a family member, and then he decided to spill the beans that there was a molestation that occurred. Right? Obviously, that's going to totally affect the value of the case. Um, so it's going to depend on the person, but there should be a hard cap. No, I don't think that $10 million is acceptable. I just don't think it. I don't think that. I mean, unless
as in
like
that's
there's some.
excessive for you, generally speaking, unless you can prove some sort of massive productivity of this person, like that is generally a good heuristic of if that's too much for a person.
Well, so let me be clear here. So I'm I would cap the wrongful death, but I would not necessarily have the same cap for other items of damages, right? So when you sue somebody for wrongful death, you can also add on things like pain and suffering if it's a particularly painful death. You can add on lost productivity, lost wages. There's all sorts of things that you can add on. Like different causes of action and different causes of damages, I suppose, that you can then assert. I would be okay with that. Like if you can prove this person was making $30 million a year, then yeah, then the damages are going to be higher for sure. But if you have like somebody who's making 20 grand a year and like they have no family and they die, yeah, like there's going to be like culpability and we're going to like go after them. But it's not as much of a loss. It's just not. This person was not as valuable to
Okay,
society
sure.
or to anybody.
Well, first of all, yeah. So, well, I don't want to live in that world, but just to grant that.
That's the
So, and
current
also,
world we live in.
I know, and that's why, like, I'm advocating against it. And so to relate to our past conversation, and you said, pain and suffering can potentially be included. So hypothetically, you seem to value, human subjectivity, where like your subjectivity matters almost infinitely more than any animal on this non-human animal on the spectrum. So is it permissible for you for a loved one to say like this feels like based on the suffering, this feels like $100 million worth of suffering?
They can make the argument
How can
and
they make the argument? Or rather, so they can, well,
try to
I'm making
convince
it
a
now.
jury. Yeah, try to convince a jury. This is how much I fucking suffered. Like,
So
oh
there
my
should
god,
not
I've
be a
suffered
cap
this
then.
much. Well, no, no,
Like,
no. There's caps for a couple of other reasons, right? But ultimately, like everything's a case by case. But the reason why you put caps is because you occasionally get juries who are idiots and don't understand the value of money, and will assign tremendous amounts of damages to things that no reasonable person, like they're just being unreasonable, right? And we have a duty in the legal system to protect people from unreasonableness, and that includes from a jury.
no, no, well, but then doesn't that negate, like, someone should be able to make the argument that this feels like, human suffering is what matters the most,
Yes, they can
according
make
to you.
they can make that argument to a
But then so then why can't they?
reasonable right, because they have the right to make that argument to a reasonable deciding body. And there are certain amounts that if the deciding body decides that is the amount of money, they have proven themselves to be unreasonable, right? If you have a jury who's given $3 billion for a paper cut, you are not reasonable. And you're just a bunch of
What were you
idiots.
saying? Well, wait, just as you would never, you were not
Reasonable
accepting,
according to me.
you're not accepting Synth's argument of like, there's no way your derivement of pleasure from meat overrides any sort of cow suffering, right? But
Yeah.
you make that,
Synth believes that's not reasonable, right? And I'm
but you
sure
believe,
Synth,
yeah.
and this informs Synth's decisions here and Synth's position. But for myself, like I'm only speaking to what I feel is reasonable, and I do not feel that it is reasonable for $10 million to be associated with paper cut. And if a jury decides that, I think they're unreasonable.
What do you believe that? And then we'll go to Ali. Do you believe that the Rudy Giuliani case where he got sued by those poll workers and they won $148 million from him in
Stupid.
Really? Okay.
I don't even know the case. Did he kill anybody or like rape anybody?
He completely destroyed their lives. He utterly destroyed their lives. He used his platform to say that they had or part of like overthrowing the election. The
Okay, how many people are we talking about here?
There's two individuals.
And what was their race, more importantly, for lack of
No. So we had two people. We had two people.
Yeah.
140 million. And like how what were they making as poll workers?
Nothing. It's not. Well, they can't even. It's not just what they're making there. But like they're having trouble finding employment because the moment people Google them, they know. Oh, it's those two, right? That comes up, and and they literally had to abandon their house, right? Because the house that they grown up in generations, they had to abandon that because they're being threatened, stalked, doxxed, swatted. All that stuff. So like they're like constantly on their run.
Swatted.
This is like this is similar to what Alex Jones did to the Sandy Hook families, right? It was that type of situation. How bad they just continuously went at them using a massive platform to do so, and this platform literally being himself and like the words of the president, So like in that case, just quickly, like would that be? Does that sound closer to $148 million worth of damages?
It does not sound anywhere close to $148 million.
Okay. All right.
I don't know what I would value that at, if anything, but definitely not over. I mean, over $100 million. Are you kidding me?
Okay. All right. We'll have to have that conversation later. That's interesting.
Like for example, Prime, like in my state, there was like what $125 million verdict because they changed the shifts of like a worker with Down syndrome, and like they should have kept her original shift because that was like accommodating her. It's like
sure. I don't know how you
$125 million.
I don't know how you can compare these things. I don't know about that first verdict from how you described it.
Yeah, but a jury did this. Like,
yeah, I hear you.
We live in a society where people think that's worth $125 million.
I hear you. Yes. And maybe the more I learn about that case, maybe that one seems ridiculous. But the one I described to you seemed eminently reasonable. But we can talk about that later and have a deeper conversation. And when you can familiarize yourself with the situation too. So Ali, thank you. He reached out, said he had like an interesting perspective here. So I'm curious what you have to say. Please go ahead.
Yeah, you guys hear me good?
Mm-hmm.
All right, cool. So I'm a massage therapist. I've been a massage therapist for the past 10 years in Michigan. I've worked in a bunch of different kind of spas, from like your strip mall spas to med spas to chiropractic offices. Corey, I also hate chiropractors, so me and you are on board. So in Michigan, when you open a med spa that does, like, for example, the vitamin IVs or Botox, or if they do the fat moving, like fat removal, the suction cupping or anything like that, you typically work under a doctor. So it's like the med spa opens, there's a doctor that not runs it, but is partnered with that spa so that you can get the prescriptions for these types of things. And then you'll have like nurses or phlebotomists that work under them. I think the problem is in the holistic field that a lot of the people take what we do and then we call ourselves like healers. And so we're not supposed to be medical practitioners, but we kind of pseudo act like it a lot of the time. And so the problem with that, in terms of like our clients with consent, is that they look at us and they see us as like licensed practitioners working under doctors, and so they give us a level of trust that you don't get from like a normal person. And so the further issue is that the things that they're prescribing, they might not be negative. So like the issue I have with like chiropractors is that you'll go to a chiropractor, your back hurts, it feels great temporarily. When you leave, the chiropractor will typically tell you something like, hey, come back to us twice a week for the next 6 months. That's not going to fix your problem. That's only going to temporarily, like, you're in pain right now. It's going to temporarily fix you. Same thing with massages. So what happens is we're told as like workers that, hey, so as a massage therapist, what used to happen in my earlier years was we'd get a new client, we'd recommend to the client, hey, the best method is for you to come back 3 times a month. It's not. You don't need a massage 3 times a month. You want one. So that's like my issue when it comes to these kinds of things in terms of like consent. So like be weary when you're going to like these types of holistic practitioners and their recommendations and how much they're recommending and how much you should come back, when like really what we're supposed to recommend is like, as a massage therapist, if your back's hurting, the best thing is to be doing some stretches, focusing on your posture, and then doing some strength training. But you're not going to come back if your back feels good. So that's kind of like the issue I have with that. So level of consent is weird, to like Lactoid's point. And yeah.
Thank you.
I think that just lends credence to like the legitimacy of like people understandably fall prey to it. Because like, yeah, if you call yourself healers, like just as some people understandably, they can't distinguish between an MD and a doctor of osteopathy, a DO. They can't distinguish between healer and someone with like some piece of paper that has on crayon labeled healer and an actual MD. Some people understandably, unfortunately, like can't distinguish. And like I'm sure a lot of these spas, like they have great amenities and very well upkept and everything's polished. Just as there's high production quality for Dr. Mike. His video, and again, he's a handsome guy and he speaks really well. And so understandably, again, Lactoid's a very smart person in my opinion. But like understandably, it's not so easy to distinguish of like unless you actually do the digging. He's not going to be the most forthcoming or make it obvious like, yeah, I'm a doctor of osteopathy. I'm like not an MD. That's not in the disclaimer. In fact, I think in the disclaimer on YouTube, it's like, this is coming from a licensed medical professional, which like, yeah, legally speaking, true. But in reality, like osteopathy is a pseudoscience.
As a massage therapist, I'm a licensed medical professional, like as well, technically.
Yeah. Which not to like, denigrate like your profession or anything like that.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not a doctor at all. I'm not allowed to do anything. I'm not allowed to prescribe anything. I can literally just make you feel good in the moment.
That's what I do with women. Maybe on the same level, medically trained professional. Yeah. So, Blacktoid, this is like what Corey is saying, and to a certain extent what Ali is saying. It like goes back to what I was mentioning about like if you said that the problem is that we're being too paternalistic as a society, right? The idea that the government will save you. And just get rid of that idea, and people will have a bit more skepticism. And I'm sure that would actually be the case. So we got rid of the idea of the FDA and other similar agencies that, yeah, like who knows like what is in any particular product. But when comparing messages that you're receiving, right? Because how we for most of these things, if you're not doing your own like research, you're comparing the quality of messaging coming at you. If it's a slick message, if it's a clearly one that a lot of money went into, it simply seems more legitimate. Like it's just like in any argument. If the argument simply sounds persuasive rather than necessarily having the logic or the facts behind it, then that can persuade people rather than one that's more logically sound.
So under that logic, we should surely be censoring arguments we don't like, right? So, like in case they might convince people, right? We're concerned about that.
No, no. So like my point is that within the context of, because the problem with saying that with that is that like I'm not sure if there is a direct link to harm in the same way as if we're talking about a spa um injecting you with something, right? Like that's okay. I'm
Well,
gonna have to think about that.
the
I'm gonna have to
messaging is
think
them
about
trying to
that.
convince you. Yeah, the messaging is them trying to convince you to come inject your body with urine. And I think it's reasonable to, provide a warning, right? Hey, consumer beware. Uh, this practice does not appear to be particularly effective.
But they
But
can override that, like we talked about, like synth.
yeah, there's going to be a level. There's always going to be like some level of enforcement that we can do. All right, like if we wanted to ban all misinformation, religion's out the door tomorrow. We can't do this. Like, so to some extent, people have a right to believe what they want to believe, and they have a right to do what they want to do with their own body, even if we don't like it, and even if we don't like what they're doing with their own body.
Wait, but
We have
you don't
we have
hold
a
that
duty
view,
to
right? Because
warn
you
them.
think that
We have a
in
duty to warn them
wait,
to
why
some
do you have
extent.
wait, but how can you have a legally imposed duty to warn somebody? Because that would just be a control of what they could do with their own body. You're just forcing them to say a certain thing.
Sure, it is a violation of consent to force somebody to warn somebody. But again, a proper contract between a producer and a consumer requires there be consent. How do you maximize that consent? It's a very, very, very small
Yeah, if
imposition
you
to
keep
say
going
you have to
back to
disclose. Yes, you have to disclose what you're providing them. It's a very great benefit
the issue
if
is they
they know
don't.
that.
The issue, yeah, they're able to consent if they have the actual informed choice, but just saying it to them isn't the same as informing them. Some people, it's the case you say it to them and they still don't have the actual information. They just don't believe what you said. In which case, they're not making an active, affirmative, informed choice, like you
Well,
said.
you don't have
They're
you don't have
just
to believe
wrong.
the information to have it.
What do you think it means to have information?
Have it be provided in front of you. Hey, just so you know, the experts of the government say this doesn't work.
So if I say
Take that at
something
your own
like
will.
the following statement is a lie, you have to tell the following statement is a lie. I have no evidence for my the shit that I believe, and I don't clean my needles. That's a lie, by the way. Do you think that would count as providing the evidence?
No, because
Then the context matters, right? Like
well,
obviously they're
yes,
misinformed.
of course the context matters. I never said it didn't, right? And so if you is evidence, right? In the court case, we discover evidence that this person like provided the warning, but like represented it in such a way to make the consumer believe that it wasn't even a warning, that the government doesn't actually think this, then that would be wrong, right? But
Look,
if they said
in some cases,
if
the
they said
person will
I
think the government
disagree,
thinks this,
if
and that's not going to be sufficient for them believing the information. That's part of the context.
they don't have
The
to
government
believe it.
says this isn't going to be. If they don't believe it, they're not really getting the information. The context is included there, and the
No,
context
they
is
got
things
the
like,
information.
listen, hold on. The context includes things like the background knowledge they have about the government, just like it includes the phrases that are said around it. It's not the case that somebody coming away from it not believing the shit because of the fact that they just assume the government's going to lie to them. It's somebody who's actually informed. They're still misinformed.
No, nobody has a. I don't think there's like a. The credibility of the government is the credibility of the government, right? And so I don't think there's like a unique. I, I don't think it makes sense to like. There's a unique responsibility of the government to like argue that it's or it argue that it's credible. Um, or like I guess not even argue, like
I'm not talking about any responsibility to the
mandate by
government. It's
law that
totally
it's
tangential to
credible.
the question,
Well,
which
no,
is
but so
whether or
but
not they're informed.
the reason why it's relevant is because like the only thing I'm proposing we do in the interest of maximizing individual choices, and the information that people have access to, is that you have a disclaimer where hey, the government has looked at this and says. Or like the top health agencies, et cetera, people, very, trustworthy institutions have said this doesn't work. I disagree with them. I believe that injecting yourself with urine
They're
is a
not
good thing,
trustworthy to
but
them, right? They don't trust them.
then that's their choice to not trust them.
Yeah, what I'm telling you is it doesn't matter if it's their choice. What I'm telling you is they're not informed. They don't actually know the outcomes, the actions. They're mistaken on the probabilities. They're mistaken on the risk they're taking. They're not informed, so they're not consenting.
I guess I just disagree with the definition of informed here. Then, like, I think that if the information is provided to an adult and the adult rejects it, the information was still provided.
Well, wait. I'm pretty sure even you would concede that adult of like sound mind, even though like for
Sure.
medical
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
informed
Yeah.
consent.
Yes. An adult of sound mind who has provided information and rejects it was still provided that information. If you tell me cigarettes cause cancer and I still light a cigarette, I have consented.
How
That's
can you
it.
be you have to have some really low bar of sound mind to be including people who have persistent delusions about things like whether or not homeopathy is going to be healthy for them.
It's pretty fucking low, yeah.
For
Or
sure.
the vibrations in the rosemary, whatever the herb was.
Yeah.
The good vibrations.
Yeah,
If somebody
look,
thinks that like
again,
it's a divine miracle, are we gonna say that person's of sound mind?
yes. Here's the problem with this synth. Like, I understand where you're coming from, but like, we can't be myopic about this. We live in a country or world, really, in which the vast majority of people genuinely believe like things like, you know,
The
water
power of
literally, or
prayer.
like wine literally turns into blood, right? They believe things like, uh, you know,
There are a lot of people who are not of sound mind. I agree. It's just that like saying those
would you
people
consider
are
more
not
than half?
misinformed.
Would you consider more than half the
Yeah,
world?
yeah. Most of the world is probably wildly misinformed.
Do you think it's
on many,
ethical to
many
fuck a
things.
religious person because they're obviously like not of sound mind?
Yeah, I don't think that you have to be of sound mind to have sex. I think if two mentally ill people have sex with each other, if like, so I'm like
Wait,
a person
what?
diagnosed. Listen, if I'm a person who's been diagnosed with severe depression, right? If I go have sex with somebody, I don't think they're raping me. I'm like clearly I got
I
a
don't
mental
think
issue.
depression is like a delusionary disease.
Well, we can go over the delusionary disease. We can imagine somebody's schizophrenic or something. It doesn't mean that they can't have sex with anyone.
I don't think a schizophrenic can consent to having sex in the same way I don't think children can consent to having sex.
I think if they're misinformed about that sex act, then it would make sense to say the person can't consent there. But if it's a person who's like, yeah, I have like schizophrenic breaks with reality sometimes, and I've got these like persistent paranoid delusion that people are out to get me or something. But yeah, I'm still down to have sex. That person's
Yeah.
not consenting. They can still
But
clearly
hold on,
consent.
hold on. But what if that
I-
person like is having a break with reality? And they don't understand, like, oh, like people are out to get me, but if I fuck this person, if I suck this dick, then that'll save me from like my enemies.
Yeah, I think that person, it would be unconsensual to have sex with that person. You're like doing it under like
But-
an implicit threat.
Sure, but like, what if you
and
like can't reasonably tell one way or the other? Like from an external
You
observation.
should just not have sex with the person if you're not sure if they're consenting.
Well then, like, I mean,
Well, they
like,
can't tell you because the people will find out, and then they'll kill you and her.
yeah, can we like reasonably like know whether a schizophrenic person is having a delusion?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so there's like, it's not the kind of thing that you're always gonna know or something. But if you like know that here are the delusions that are present in my schizophrenia, that it's pretty easy to be like, oh well, yeah, none of them have any impact on like us having sex. They're just things about like you have like.
But you're not
I don't
always
know, you
going to
think
know.
the government's chasing you or something, right? You don't
But
think
you're not
I'm-
It's
always
also
gonna
with
know.
alcohol. Like alcohol is
Yeah,
also
I agree that
a
you can't know for sure. You can't know anything for sure. But
So
you
the-
can have some pretty good. But that's true for
So
everything.
so there's chances like incidental rape then, right? Like there's a significant chance of
I don't.
incidental rape.
I bake in the intent into my definition of rape. I don't think if somebody slips on a banana peel and their dick falls into somebody's
Or
ass, they
sexual
rape them.
assault then, right? Like sexual assault doesn't have to.
I bake in
so
intent
be-
into that. But yeah, you can say that we can say there's some accidental things which, other than the intent component, they fit all the other components. Yeah,
Yeah.
certainly.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, but I mean,
Does that mean if you get sufficiently drunk, like, can you even rape somebody?
can you rape someone if you're sufficiently drunk?
If you're sufficiently drunk to not like that, to not know what
There's
you're doing.
probably there's certainly some degree of it where you wouldn't be able to, right? I think you'd agree with that. I think the threshold's probably you have to be pretty fucked to be
No, like so Brock
not able
Turner,
to.
for example, like when he digitally raped that woman, was like
I don't know
think
anything about the case.
okay, well his alcohol content was like a point, like it was
Below
crazy
lethal?
high. It was like
Wait,
a
he did-
0.3 or like a 0.4 or something. Like he was
What,
like
he
like
digitally
borderline
raped her?
dead with his fingers, digits.
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
digitally okay, so he stuck his yeah. I don't think
Yep.
I think in a court of law saying that like that kind of person is like, oh well, yeah, he totally fits the mens rea component of the crime. I don't think so. But I don't know
Wow.
for the case.
That's
That was
interesting.
part of the logic behind
Yeah.
the lenient sentence they gave to Brock Turner, and there was
I have no
outrage over
idea
that.
what the specifics of the case are.
Yeah.
Is he
Brock
having
Turner
problem with-
There
with
might
the
be really good reasons
affluenza?
for the outrage. From the little bit of information I
different
know
guy.
here, it doesn't seem clear.
is Brock Turner the one behind the dumpster?
The
Behind the
swimmer.
dumpster,
Yeah,
yep.
the swimmer
yeah.
behind the dumpster. Yeah. His
Ah.
BAC was like in like 0.3 or 0.4 something. He was completely blackout drunk. And he had stuck his finger up this girl's vagina before he was tackled. And then as part of the trial, like I mean, obviously there was a couple things that were taken into account, but one of the things that was taken into account was his mental status, of course. It's always going to be taken into account. And he got a pretty light sentence, and there was massive outrage. I think that
Yeah.
judge got voted out like pretty shortly afterwards.
It was really bad. Yeah, I remember that.
What was the reason they gave as to why they had a huge outrage and that not just
It was during
did they
Me
just
Too.
think something
It
different?
was during
Oh,
Me Too
okay.
movement.
And he
I
was
have,
he,
yeah, I don't know anything about the
yeah,
fucking
he
case.
was a white like middle class or upper middle class like
Slim
college
team
kid.
college kid.
Yeah,
they just view it as
yeah.
part of like a broader trend that they don't like.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if the judge said something along the line. This might be another case that I might
Well,
be
it's not just
confusing it with.
alcohol. Wasn't he?
But
At least I'm doing cursory reading. He was also on like LSD and like consuming like marijuana. Like he seems like
this
a
man was having a
cocktail.
good night. This man
Yeah,
was having-
I'm not even sure he was there for that. Like, I don't know what you do.
but I think
If like a chip
I-
inserted itself into his brain and then like controlled his body, would like we find him culpable of that too? Like, it just seems like
Well,
If he put the chip in, yes.
I think part of
could
the
agree
case.
that you could say
Let me
something like
say
you
the
find him
thing.
culpable of putting a chip in, but like
I
if
think-
it's just like there's some chance of like some
I-
really
oh
small
my
chance
God.
if you get. I'm so sorry.
I think part
You
of
go,
the,
you go, you go.
I think the part of the case is that like the judge said something like they can relate with that individual
Oh,
this
God.
yeah like it was a white male judge saying like I can see myself or something along those lines in the case, which put ideas in people's heads as
It
to
was
why.
a quote, Snipe.
Yeah, it was, but yeah, so I'm
But
right.
that
But I'm
sounds
right.
like a
There was
wildly
some
different
similar
It's a
things.
bad quote.
Yeah.
It's a pretty bad quote. That sounds
Yeah,
like a
dude,
wildly different judgment.
judges
That sounds
saying
like they have more
stupid
reason
things.
to
It
be mad.
happens.
Oh.
Well, yeah, it seems like they have more reason to be mad about it than just like, oh, well, they said he didn't have the intent component, so they found him not guilty or something. Like, it seems like it's more a matter of like, oh, they gave him a more lenient sentence
No,
while
no.
finding him guilty of the intent component.
Because they free like he was the target of like the outrage as well, to the extent of like I mean, his picture was up everywhere. How did you miss this, Synth? Like, this was like a major cultural phenomenon for
Yeah,
like
it was a big
quite some
one.
time.
The Me Too stuff, it just didn't pay a lot of attention.
Okay.
This wasn't even like
interesting.
specifically Me Too. It was just big. Brock Turner's name was
Okay.
just big.
Yeah.
Look, I've heard his name before. He's some
Yeah.
sports guy or something. I don't know who Brock
Oh.
Turner is.
Let's go to Corey and then Ali.
Yeah, I'm curious. You probably know some of these cases, but I'm curious on
This guy.
your position,
Yeah.
your position, and maybe in some of the other panel of like the people use like the defense of like I was sleeping, of like there are people who committed murders like in their
Sleepwalking. Yeah.
sleep, yeah, or like as a result of night terrors. So you probably know more details of these, but like to use that a legitimate like defense of
Yeah.
like.
Yeah, it has been used in the past successfully.
If you
as a
agree
defense
with the
as well.
defense, then you should agree with the argument we were making earlier, right? Which is just that okay, so you agree that he didn't have the information there, right? So back to the actual argument we were making, which is like what maximizes affirmative informed choice. Doesn't seem like they're making an informed choice here.
No. So the cases that I understand with like the sleepwalking, it's in situations where the person didn't have like knowledge to any reason to believe that they were going to behave violently.
Well,
Or
they
they're
have
going to behave when they fall asleep, right?
look in
So
the case
I
of the
think people
drunk drinking, he did have some reason though. He has some
Are-
reason, not
Yes,
high reason,
yes,
but
you're,
some.
no, you're right. Yes, I do. This is part of the reason why I do hold drunk people responsible is because I think there's like a chain where like you consent to the first drink, then you consent like in this state, you consent to the second one, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, and like you understand the substance is going to have an effect on you, and it's going to impair your judgment, more violent, more impulsive, et cetera, et cetera. And then there's like a level of culpability all the way down, right?
There's a
That's my
level
position
of
there.
it. Yeah, there's a
There's,
level
well,
of it.
but it's
we all-
also, but it's like
there's a lesser level.
it's
right?
every no,
Because-
I don't think so. Well,
Oh, okay.
arguably, I think there is a strong argument against it though, because when you take that first drink, you're of complete sound mind, and you take in the first drink, knowing that in this different state, you might feel compelled to take a second drink or to take a different substance, right? So like you are consenting to the future action by engaging in that initial
Wait,
action
then how
and
do you think
impairing
it's
your
a
judgment.
valid defense?
Well, so what Synth, my current position is I don't think it's a valid defense. Being drunk when it comes to a crime, I think there's strong arguments that you can use to like mediate punishments. I don't necessarily agree with those arguments. I can be convinced. All right, I'm kind of coming at this from like a sense of humility here. Of my current position is that being drunk, as long as you are the one who chose to get drunk or chose to do drugs, you are fully responsible for your actions. As long as you intentionally took the substance, knowing that that's going to impair your judgment or impair your decision making or impair your actions later on, and then it actually does do it, right? When it comes to sleeping, I think it's fundamentally different. Where most people, everybody, a reasonable person falling asleep doesn't expect they're going to kill somebody in their sleep.
Well,
If somebody
you don't
does have a reason
expect
to
you're-
believe,
Wait, you don't expect you're gonna rape somebody when you're drunk either. You have like some amount of reason to believe there's some chance of it happening in either case.
yeah,
You're just
yeah,
doing- there's a
I think the
threshold,
chance
right?
there, right? I think the chance there, based on what we know about drugs and decision making and judgment, et cetera, like that risk is I think it's a reasonable person I think a reasonable person understands that that's a risk of getting involved in those substances.
Yeah, but the same is true of a person driving their car down the highway. They understand there's like an even higher risk of you getting into an accident, killing somebody, or harming somebody like very severely when you're in an accident. You can harm somebody a lot more. The chance of harm is a lot more in the case of getting really fucking blackout drunk versus driving your car. Driving your car is more dangerous, just
Sure.
empirically.
Yeah.
But
And
you wouldn't say
you
you,
can
but you wouldn't say
consent
if you
to
accidentally hit some. You wouldn't say if somebody
consent to
accidentally
the risk
hit
of dying
somebody.
whenever you get on the road. Yeah.
You can say you like there's like some amount of information you have about like there's a risk of dying that you consent to, and I agree you consent to the risk, but you don't consent to dying. But that's irrelevant to the question, which is just that if we're saying you're morally culpable, if you get blackout drunk and like not even blackout drunk, you get like so drunk you're not even the decision maker anymore. It's just all impulse. Saying that person is morally culpable, but you're not morally culpable if you drive your car and accidentally hit someone. Like it doesn't seem like you're morally culpable in the car case, are you?
So it depends. Okay, well, I understand what you're saying. The difference is that when you get in the road, everyone else consents to the risk of dying. When you go to a party, not everyone's consenting to the risk of being raped, right? Because
If you
it's
say
illegal. It's illegal to be like to rape. Rape is illegal, but killing someone with your car isn't necessarily illegal if it's an accident.
What
So
if everyone says
there's
something like, we're all going to get super fucking drunk, like totally blacked out drunk at this party? Now are you consenting to rape?
no, because rape is illegal. So there's no agreed upon expectation among society that like we're going to do this. If
Well,
like there
it
is
being illegal
if
is separate to the moral question, which is what we're talking
no,
about.
no, but it's important when it comes to defining expectations. That's why it's important, right?
Well,
So
wait, no.
we expect
We can't
we
say we
expect
expect it just because we can't say we expect people to follow the law in this context if we understand there's a really high risk of them not following the law in this context.
no when it comes to holding them legally culpable. If something is illegal, we are
You
more than able to hold them
No,
legally
you just said it's
culpable.
about the expectations we have. We're talking about the moral question, right? Not what you can legally hold them to be. If you're saying morally, there's a different expectation when you go to a party or something. Well, we could just pump it into the party. Just say, man, everyone's going to be drunk at the party. They're all going to be blackout drunk, total impulsive behavior everywhere. And you wouldn't say the person's consented to sex there, even though they have a pretty high expectation that there are going to be some people who are going to be blackout fucking drunk there.
There could be. Let me just flesh this out a little bit, okay, without being cut off for a second. So when it comes to driving,
I don't know
when
about that. Maybe you
everybody
should. Sorry, I'm
when
you
it comes to driving, right? Uh, it's an inherently dangerous activity that everybody in the road agrees upon that there's like going to be a risk of accident and death that comes from this, and there are certain activities that you can't do because they are illegal, and they are thus specifically the expectation of that added risk is not reasonable for a reasonable person to assume because it's illegal, right? We will punish you if we discover you have it, if you're engaged in it, like drunk driving. The reason why drunk driving is illegal is because it raises the natural raises the natural risk threshold that comes with driving. But there is a base level of risk that comes with driving. When it comes to a party, there's going to be a risk of getting drunk if you drink alcohol because alcohol is legal and there's a perfect expectation of getting drunk. But there's like because rape is illegal, right? There's no expectation, or you shouldn't have the expectation of getting raped. And even if you did, I suppose that wouldn't necessarily stop us from punishing the rapist. Like you didn't consent to this intervening actor doing something to you.
That's the same
And
argument over again.
And you could argue the person did intentionally rape you because they knew alcohol could cause them to rape you, and they drank it anyway.
They knew alcohol could possibly cause them to rape you, and you knew alcohol, which they'd be drinking, could possibly cause them to rape you, and we're somehow saying that only one of these people has an expectation?
Yes, because one's the rapist and one's the rapee. Like one's doing the action.
But we both understand.
If you're conducting the action,
we both understand
like
the chance of a wait. But we both understand the people have the same information in that case, which is this person's going to be so fucking blackout drunk, it's insane. They both have the same information. They both have the information that it's illegal. It's not like when you're super blackout drunk, you're going to follow the laws. You don't have any expectation people who are blackout fucked up drunk are going to be like, oh yes, that's illegal, so I'm not going to do that. Like we don't have that expectation.
No, but that is a societal expectation. And anybody who like, I understand that you could expect that somebody does illegal things to you, but that doesn't change that what they did to you was non-consensual.
I agree that it doesn't change that, but it is expected, and that was your argument, which is that you have consented to it if it's sufficiently expected, and in this case, they're the same amount of expected. They're the exact same amount.
Don't act incredulous, okay? This concept of like people consent to the risks of driving, but like if you get drunk and you get raped, you've consented to the risk of getting raped. This kind of goes back again to the example that we talked about in the alley, where you have a party, like an intervening actor that's like intentionally doing something to you, like that you, as a risk, just simply didn't sign up for. You didn't consent to that. Like there's a difference between driving a like large multi-ton vehicles and like understanding that like mistakes are going to happen. But if somebody intentionally like kills you or like does an action that raises that risk threshold of them accidentally killing you, we're going to criminalize that. We're not going to allow that because we don't want to let that happen.
Yeah,
But then when it
Lacto,
comes
I
to
know
getting
that's your
drunk at a
position.
party,
Well,
when it comes to-
look, I know
Yeah.
that's your position, but the expectation that you have when you're saying something like, if I get really fucking drunk, I might do something terrible, is you have the same information there, other than knowing a bit more about your dispositions, right? You might know you're a better person or something, right? You have the same information about your dispositions that the other people in that party do when they know you're getting drunk. So they both have the expectation with the exact same credence. They both have the
I
information.
don't think there's
of,
any reasonable expectation of getting raped at a party.
Okay, you can say over and over again, you don't think there's any reasonable. I don't either. I don't think there's any reasonable expectation that when you get drunk, you're going to rape somebody. I think it's pretty unlikely in both.
Yeah, so we punish the rapist.
You're back to we're looping, right? I'm telling you that in one of these cases, right, you're saying this person does consent, right? The rapist does consent to doing the rape. And in the other case, the rape victim is not consenting. And like that obviously begs the question, because I'm not going to say they're like a rapist without intent. But if it's the case that you're saying one of these people has the expectation and one of them doesn't, why would the expectation be any different if they're both using the exact same information, which is when people are drunk, they do this kind of action while drunk? They both know it's illegal. They both understand that if you're a drunk person, you're not going to be. They have the same information about that as well. If you're a drunk person, you're going to be less likely to follow laws. If you're real fucking drunk, you're going to be way less likely to follow laws. They're operating off the exact same information, they have the exact same expectations. Both of them have the exact same percentage chance of that person raping the other person. Yet you're saying one of them consents. I don't think either of them consent.
Do you agree with me that when you drink one glass of alcohol, you recognize that it makes it more likely for you to make a poor decision in the future?
More likely, of course. And
Okay.
other people recognize that if I drink alcohol, I'm also more likely to do that.
Yeah, and then it also makes it more likely for you to maybe drink another glass of alcohol in that state, which further increases your chance. Yeah.
Yeah, and so there's like going to be this as you drink more alcohol, there's like a higher and higher chance. But obviously, the chance of you drinking 2 glasses is lower than drinking 1, 3 is lower than 2, and so on. And you have this you can have this curve where you graph it out or something.
So at
but
each
the information
stage,
I'm making that decision off of. Wait, hold on. The information I'm making that decision off of is the same information that somebody else is making the decision off of. The chance of me raping them in my head, judging based on the information of, how much alcohol have I had? If I have more alcohol, am I likelier to rape them? They can make that same kind of calculation in their head. How much alcohol has this person had? If they have more alcohol, they're likely to rape me. And on your view, they had the exact same expectation, and that's the qualification for consent here, which would mean they either both consent or both neither. I think neither of them do.
So you would not punish drunk rapists?
I would punish drunk rapists. I wouldn't punish somebody who's like unconscious sleep raping somebody, or somebody who's so fucking drunk that their brain doesn't work. I'd punish them for being that drunk. I wouldn't punish them for like as though they did the wrong at the same time.
So we got
one last thing. What if they get like drunk and they rape somebody, and then like they're so drunk they don't know what they're doing, right? And then like they get it up or they get not held guilty, right? And then they get drunk again, like.
Yeah, I think we'd have a higher punishment for somebody who does an action which they have more reason to believe will have bad outcomes. I just think it should scale with. I think
exactly.
It should, listen. Okay. I think it should scale with the likelihood of the outcomes. I don't think it's the case. There's a 0.0001% chance now of me raping somebody as opposed to a 0% chance, and therefore, I've done some action which I should be punished for because of that chance. Like if I walk outside my house, there's a higher chance. That's most people who get raped are getting raped by somebody they know, right? If you become friends with somebody, that makes you a higher likelihood to rape them. It's not very likely. It's a slightly higher likelihood, marginally likely, some infinitesimally small fucking increase. But there's still an increase. We wouldn't say it's wrong to walk outside or become friends with other people because of the fact that there's some percentage chance increase in you raping them.
So I gotta let some of the other people in. Ollie, did you want to say something? And then, okay, no problem. Corey?
Just I'm sure we'll come back around to what's being spoken about because
It's a Twitch panel. Every 3 seconds there has to be some mention of rape, so it doesn't count.
Fair. So yeah, maybe just to recenter the conversation on the topic. I think I know the answer, but maybe just to crystallize it. So Lactoid, we're talking about med spas, and these are largely for cosmetic purposes. Well, yeah, I mean, whatever. basically, I would say
Same argument for heart surgery. Yeah.
okay, yeah. So like you also have no issues with, let's say, so I'm gonna post an article again in the Discord chat of like there's this aspect of like, well, as a result of again, more misinformation spread by people like Joe Rogan and others, like there's stem cell tourism now of like people now seeking out stem cell treatments, which just get them randomly injected, and no surprise, it happens to result in tumors developing.
Oh
Where I'm
fuck.
just posting case because spoiler alert, injecting random cells into your body can result in tumors forming.
Holy fuck.
Uh, and I'll also post another case of like, yeah, people in it's really tricky because in this instance with the medical spas, okay, I would say they're largely preying on, let's say, probably people with self-esteem issues or body image issues. Maybe not the healthiest of self-esteem. I think that's fair to say. But when it comes to this, they are preying, and this is something that I can sort of empathize with to a certain degree. They're preying on pretty desperate people. Of like people seek out these stem cell treatments for potential treatments for, or the purported marketing of these treatments for cancer, a whole host of conditions. Where again, I'm gonna post another case study of like people losing their visions of like, oh yeah, there's physicians out there that are like saying, oh yeah, inject these stem cells, in whatever
Into
your
your
ocular cavity.
eyeballs. Oh
I'm
boy.
like, yeah, it'll restore your vision. Spoiler alert, doesn't happen to do that. So like, but yeah, but they're preying on like these desperate people. Like, so like in that case, so for you, like consent is all consent is there. Oh, like as long as they also like give the disclaimer of like, hey, there's
The
no real
disclaimer.
evidence.
Yeah.
Okay. And also like at the same time, just wanted to post that other case study. So I'm curious as what you would do is again to refocus it on this story that was provided with the prompt of like, so with the patient that died, they received TPN. Technically speaking, okay, I am not a medical professional, but I'm decently informed. But take what I say with a grain of salt. But technically speaking, TPN, properly administered, as in technically speaking, nothing was, as far as I could tell, done egregiously wrong in terms of like it was administered through a vein. Maybe not the most appropriate vein or type of catheter, but basically they were just like flooded with electrolytes, as in they're like, I don't think they were trying to get any sort of magical medical benefits. Like I don't think any real, as far as I know, no real medical claims were being made. It's just like they were just like given this TPN, and then like it resulted in death. So like at some level, it's hard to argue if there's any sort of like malpractice. So like, is that person just like out of luck?
Yeah, potentially, for sure. And I feel like the risks of TPN should be explained to the patient beforehand, saying, "Hey, it's normally done in the heart, but we're going to be doing it in the arm because we believe that to be better or preferential in this case. There's going to be some risk of death. We have these credentials. We don't have these credentials. Like, explain who they are, and sign here. And if the person understands the situation and signs as an adult, then I think that it's perfectly rational for them to do so. If they want to engage, I mean, look, I think people should be allowed to die if they choose to do so, right? And so ultimately, if I believe someone has the legal right, or should have the legal right to end their own life, then obviously they should also have the legal right to pursue whatever treatments they want.
I mean, yeah, I agree. As a Canadian who supports medical assistance dying, I agree. You have the right to die.
Okay.
Electro.
Oh wait, you have the right to die, but not the right to inject yourself with urine. Why not?
Because I think one, at least is coming from a place of more, well,
There are going to be good
Yeah.
reasons to kill
Yeah.
yourself. They're not good reasons to. They're not going to be good reasons to inject yourself with pee.
Yeah, hold on.
Who are you to
I don't-
judge
I-
someone's individual reasons
I
to
don't-
inject themselves with their
I
own
don't-
pee?
I
A
don't think
person
that-
who is able
What
to
if it's
judge.
a sexual thing? What if it's a sexual thing? Come on.
It is probably still. It's probably still not good for it.
But hold on, Corey. I don't think you have to like equivocate here, right? Like, and maybe I'm misunderstanding your position, but like I think you would be fine with necessarily someone poisoning themselves, right? But it's different when you're being presented with a service and being told there are benefits, right? to this. Like that's different. It's not as if these people are like I'm doing this to necessarily harm myself. Like I want to give people a space to harm themselves if they want to. I don't want them to, right? Like I want to dissuade them from doing so. But if a person wants to harm themselves, then that's them. Um, but if they are being told, hey, there are these benefits which are illusory, um, and they're doing it under that guise, then that's a problem. Now the only pushback I have for um my friend Lactoid is that like I'm with you on the idea of like giving people informed consent. And, like by like, hey, you got to read the speech. I let people know this is a situation, right? However, I don't know if that is enough because people, that's not how the human brain works. I mean, like this whole wellness movement thing that we've seen, right? This whole wellness movement has like worked off like parasitically, like off like the medical field, and this idea of doing better for yourself, right? Of being better, being a better you. So these people aren't looking to self harm, certainly not, right? And part of it is also of this wellness movement is that there is some secret knowledge out there, that is either being kept for you or you just aren't quite aware of. And now these are the people who have access to that, right? So there's the Eastern Chinese medicine way of doing things. Like, okay, well, we got these crystals, and these crystals do a thing, right? We have that knowledge, and we're gonna apply these crystals to you, and they have health benefits. Or it's the other way, and like, well, the government is lying to you about like how vaccines work, and that's a knowledge being kept away from you. So, like, when providing a service, we can give them the script, the lactoid that you're talking about, to say that these are the risks involved. But if the context surrounding that is the wellness movement, where you think that well, the government doesn't understand like Eastern Chinese medicine, which is why we don't have that, in hospitals, right? We have stupid doctors, in their way of doing things, or that the government specifically is trying to keep it away from you. Well, then that script like does like nothing. So that's my pushback. Do you understand what the things that I said?
My argument is not going to be about the efficacy of the warning. Like, if the warning is described sufficiently for the person to understand, like what the argument is, if they're able to understand, okay, the government is saying that this causes cancer or this is bad, like, or the Mayo Clinic or Harvard or whatever is saying this causes this. Like, they know, okay, they are saying that. I don't find them credible actors, and so I'm going to disregard their advice and do this anyway. That's the decision for the adult. About their own body. When it comes to other people, it's a little bit different, but when it comes to your own body, for sure.
Okay. Ali, sorry.
Yeah, so like, is your issue that okay? So if the people were, for example, if you do these IV, liquid IV treatments, sometimes you go to
or
no,
lactoid?
lactoid. So if I go to someone and the doctor isn't there, they might give you like a piece of paper, like a signed consent form, like this shit might happen, but no one ever reads those. They kind of just sign off, and then you get a newly trained, like a brand new phlebotomist who's injecting you, and then your vein fucks up. You don't have an issue with that. Like, you think that's okay? That's kind of what I'm wondering. Because like you have something you have something that's described as a medical spa. So someone's like going in thinking it's a medical treatment. They're not going to necessarily. Most people don't really read like consent forms when they're signing them, like at these kinds of spas. And then a lot of the times, the nurses that are working or the phlebotomists that are working, like, because these are newer spas or the turnover rate is so high that it's usually like a new person that they're training in, and a lot of these places are fucking up, like they're scarring the veins or fucking up the veins. So like, is that like, that's not an issue? You think that's like that person consented to that? The client consented to getting their arm fucked up?
If they sign the contract asserting that there is a risk of your arm getting fucked up, like, and the risk is due to XYZ procedure, then yeah, they shouldn't be able to. And this is like common. This is so medical malpractice law. Not only you have to prove that the doctor fucked up, but also that like the standard of
Not
care.
a doctor. It's not. Oh, okay. Seriously. Okay.
Right. Well, because of medical malpractice generally, right? Okay, not the doctor, but like any kind of healthcare professional. Not only did they fuck up, but also that the service was was underneath the standard of care. So like, it's not enough in medical malpractice law for the risk to be realized. It's also like you got to show that not only was the risk realized, but it was due to the fuck up, and that the fuck up was like a fuck up that a healthcare professional in the industry probably wouldn't do. Um, because like it's impossible to get everything right, right? If you're doing surgery on somebody and you got like a fucking knife and you're doing like intricate shit, if we're gonna hold everyone responsible for like a tiny mistake, like you're not going to have like doctors be doing these procedures because the risk is just going to be too high. Like you're not going to be able, like we want to say, okay, it's not just that like you cut the wrong artery. It was that like the artery was actually like everyone knows the artery's not supposed to be here and you cut it anyway. And so everybody knows you shouldn't have done this and you didn't do it. That's where the fuck up comes. So like a side effect of your arm getting fucked up by a phlebotomist, that's a risk. And unless you can show that the phlebotomist fucked up and their actions with like the actions that they did were sufficiently below the standard of care, then I don't think that you should hold the phlebotomist accountable.
I guess I'm thinking I would hold the med spa more accountable because to me it's just like semi manipulative when you're just like you're advertising as a medical spa. You say you're working under a doctor, and then you already have a bunch of people that are. I mean, I don't know if you call it sound of mind when people are afraid of medical doctors and they only do holistic medicines, even though the holistic treatments aren't working for them, and so they keep going to these things. And now this is a med spa. So I just feel like it's manipulative that you're like that you shouldn't be able to use the term med spa, and most people don't have these qualifiers where you walk in and they go, hey, so the government doesn't say that this shit works, we do, but they kind of just like advertise it like, hey, we're injecting vitamins, you need these vitamins, this is for sleep, this is for this is for that, and it's like they have these bundles and packages, and it's I think it's like a bit manipulative. Yeah, I don't think it's a
I'm
good
okay with
practice.
I'm okay with laws then to try to address that manipulation to some extent, right? Where like you're gonna have to explain, hey, we're not accredited. The government says what we do is wrong, right? Like at least provide the person with that information for them to use,
That
for them to do with what they will.
that's the problem with a lot of these places. It's not what they're doing is nothing is wrong. It's just it's not as beneficial as the claims. So it's like, have you heard of like the CMOS? People are pushing CMOS and eating CMOS, and apparently it has every single vitamin you've ever needed.
Of
And if you
course.
just eat the CMOS gel, and so it's like this is being sold as like the medical treatment for the world. Like it's the new superfruit, the
Yeah.
new super vegetable. So it's like
They
it's
don't
like
want you to know about it.
yeah. There's no negative to it. There's no negative effects, but there's the positives they're claiming aren't really like there.
Well, if they're claiming something, the product does something that it doesn't do, that's just classic fraud.
Uh,
Okay.
is it Corey? And we'll wrap this up soon.
Yeah, I'm curious, Lactoid. So, yeah, as sort of like pointed out, like these are arguably not legitimate or accredited medical establishments. So, do you think? Well, I don't know if this is actually true or not, but I assume sort of some of these spas have sort of like either med in the name or some sort of shorthand for medical in the name, or like there might be actual like a branch of med spa, and that's
It
like
just
their
says med
brand.
spa. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that should be like a regulated term of like, or do you think anybody should be able to use it? Like, I can put med spa outside my apartment complex. And like, yeah,
It's not like your rusty shack in the back.
yeah. Come to my porta potty, the med spa.
Just usually with
Actually,
medical
would love
spas,
that.
For the urine treatment.
for medical spas around here, a lot of massage places will do them because if you're a medical spa, you're then able to charge insurances for treatments. So just
Yeah. So do you
consider
think
you
that should
medical if
be?
you work through insurance.
Yeah. Do you think that should be a regulated term, or like that? Like you can only market yourself if you're like an accredited, like this is under the care of like an MD, not a DO.
I would need to see. I would need to honestly like. I would need to see how much confusion there actually is about this term. This would be like a case by like a I guess jurisdiction by jurisdiction basis, right? If because I wouldn't be confused, okay, but like if we do like a survey and it turns out like most people in an area are like, yeah, I thought it was a accredited hospital. Well, then
Not
like maybe
accredited,
we
but
gotta.
like they thought it was a legitimate medical establishment of like I'm getting
What does that
receiving.
mean? Legitimate medical
Well,
establishment?
yeah, like well, so I was gonna follow up with like, what do you think? So, do you think milk should be a regulated term?
No,
Okay, fair enough.
and I well perhaps actually. Like if you sell someone a glass, like you sell someone like, yeah, it's made with whole milk. I think it's reasonable to assume that's from like the whole like fatty milk from a cow, right?
But can oat milk, market themselves as use the oat milk like
Yeah,
term?
with the
Is that so?
modifier oat milk, I think that's like reasonable for people. Okay, they're putting the literally in the fucking name. It's made of oat,
What
oat
about
milk,
what
goat
about
milk.
what about what about muscle milk? Can muscle milk
Mm.
use the milk
It's
word?
going to entirely depend on survey results and levels of confusion among people, right? If I don't care if people think a med spa is like a medical facility. I only care about whether or not they're being misled about if it's like a accredited facility or who's saying it works or who's saying it doesn't. If you're being lied to about the effectiveness of the product, they're saying like, hey, this works this way, and it doesn't work this way, then I think you have a basis to go after them, right? If you're not making these claims, if you're just saying, hey, just so you're aware, like this urine treatment, there's no empirical evidence for it working. I believe it works personally, but there's no empirical evidence for it working. I think they should be treated in the same way of like if you're at a car show or a car salesman and the car salesman says, so there's no empirical evidence that this car actually runs. Like in fact, here's an advisory saying that it has no engine. I believe it might be able to run, but there's no evidence. And you buy that car and you're an adult, it's on you. Sorry, you bought the hunk of junk. Now you're
Okay.
stuck with it. If you decided to not believe the government when they're telling you that there's no engine in the car, that's. And
Okay.
then you might say, well, what does somebody want with a car with no engine? There could be plenty of reasons why somebody wants to buy a car with no engine.
Yeah.
Is it still a car with no engine?
I
Uh,
don't know, actually. That's an interesting question.
that's a good question. So I'll end things here. But this was a lot of fun. Um, and I think these questions are like really interesting to explore. And I really actually want to hear more from Synth and Lactoids back and forth because you guys were touching on some really interesting concepts. And I love the way both of you argue. You guys, uh, like I think you enlighten people through like testing your wits there. So shout out to all of you. So quickly, um, hey everyone, if you enjoyed this, hit the follow button or subscribe, whatever works for you. So support the channel. Thank you, Corey, previously for giving me a Prime sub 1 year. Prime subs, really, really kind of you. Yeah, if you got a Prime sub out there, it's free. Use that here. It would be a big help. Support this community. Subs to the channel, get bits or give subs or all that good stuff on Twitch. Or hype chats or super chats. All right, thanks so much. Lactoid, thank you for coming through. This was a whole bunch of fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Good discussions with everybody. Thank you all for challenging my beliefs. I always love to have my beliefs challenged, even if it's a little bit frustrating. So if you like what I had to say, you can find me at Lactoid TV on Twitch, Twitter, and YouTube. Thank you.
Absolutely. Synth, thanks for being such a good challenger, right?
No, I enjoyed it. Yeah. Oh, you were gonna say more stuff. Sorry.
I was just gonna say I like it when people fluster Lactoid, but like through like arguments rather than just being annoying.
No, I appreciate it. It's super fun to be on these panels. Lactoid's always like super fun to talk to. So is Corey. I did just met you today, Ali. You seem like a pretty cool individual so far. But it was a really fun discussion. It went over some like really important topics, especially during the first portion.
All right. Next, Ali, thank you for like jumping in last moment and giving us like that information. I'll send you that article that I sent to everyone else. So you'll see what we were talking about. But yeah, like the whole med spa business is crazy. And I wanted to tell you guys that I have a bunch of articles on like craziness in the medical field that I discovered there's like a huge expose on that. So we might be doing more of that. Maybe I'm trying to see if I can reach out to some bigger people if they want to come and join the panel for a discussion. 'Cause I think we have like a whole series of interesting discussions on like our relation to the medical field. Oh, we didn't even get to the people as consumers thing, patients as consumers thing. We got to do that, but I can integrate that later on. But anyway, sorry. Ali, thank you so much for coming here through. That's what I meant to say.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. It's always a good time seeing you guys. Lactoid, Corey, I've seen you before. Synth, nice meeting you, man.
Okay, thank
too.
you. And finally, our friend Corey. You've been thriving in these smaller panels. I've noticed. But thank you for coming through. You made like a lot of really great points here.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's not often that I thrive, but I do have my moments sometimes. And like, yeah, like, 'cause I do like I can't think of a better way to start my year. Like I totally missed coming on last week. I totally wanted to be there, but family obligations, and I love my family. But I also love this family as well. And totally at some level, I consider this family. Where like yeah, I just like love interacting, being challenged, and also hearing some wild and crazy takes when it comes to non-human animals that I'm slowly trying to chip away at with Lactoid. Sooner or later, I think it's going to happen. But yeah, as usual, this is great. Super appreciative to be here. You can find me on Twitch, Corey Campbell 84, Instagram, Twitter, X, YouTube. It's Corey Campbell. And Ali, Synth, Lactoid, always a pleasure, and love you, Pride.
Love you too. Off, you guys go to our friend Lactoid. I'll raid him again.
Oh, and also, if you're going to do more medical stuff like that, nothing pleases me more. I also have a whole bunch of articles about medical stuff. That's also something I'm totally passionate about for obvious
In
reasons.
terms of relation to like patients to doctors, I got some opinions on that.
Okay, good to know. I've sent the raid out. They can still hear us on Lactoid.
I might be able to wrangle in some physicians, maybe.
A physician? A physician would come on this channel.
I'm not making